Mortal Realms, an Age of Sigmar story phase. Grab your hammer so we can clear a path through the chaos and forge our own narratives in the Age of Sigmar. Your allies through the ever-dank this episode are...
I'm Davey, and I used to get pretty annoyed when my kids wouldn't let me have mushrooms on pizza, but now I kind of get it.
I'm Paul, and I'm going to open up an angry sweater shop. It's called Gloomspite Knits.
I'm Aaron, and in spite of Paul's sweet pun, I'm still kind of gloomy.
And this is Eric, reusing a pun that was just done. Gloomspite my best efforts. My reading time was eclipsed by my work. In this episode, we're discussing Gloomspite by Andy Clark. Listener, stop for a moment and imagine the town you live in. Think of the places you know and the people that live there. Sure, it's got its problems, but all in all, it's a pretty nice place, right? Now imagine that same city under siege by a hidden force of malicious goblins intent on destroying everything you hold dear. Would those in charge be able to keep you safe? Would you survive? Instead, let us tell you about a city in the Mortal Realms that had to face just that. Honestly, better them than you. How are you doing tonight, gentlemen?
You're way better.
Good.
In fact.
Yeah. I mean, I know we're leaning into the whole Twilight Zone thing, but the fedora and the cigarette are a little bit much.
I had a thing before this.
Can't smoke it. Also, for the first time that I think anyone's ever had to double up on a pun in our intros before, too. That's
I
a
know.
milestone. Yeah.
You know how I get around that?
You go first every time.
No puns.
No puns.
Yeah, a lot of people say you're no pun. So how are you guys doing?
Really, really
I mean,
good.
the laughter was good. I appreciated that at
Sure,
the end of that.
of course.
What you guys been up to? Paul, you've been working on a lot.
Yep. Been doing a lot of terrain for Warcry.
Yeah.
So I finished up a mausoleum set. So I think I actually had 1.5. Painted that up to be able to use with my terrain. And then I started work on some bridges.
Well, you've been taking your Gibbering Dome terrain from Adepticon and from the events that you run, and you've been adapting that and getting that ready. So that's pretty awesome. It's been pretty cool seeing those pictures.
Thanks. It's been a lot of fun to be able to have them useful for something again.
Yeah. Davey, you've been up to some things.
I've been playing a lot of Underworlds, obviously.
That's weird.
Yeah, but it's been cool to be vicariously excited. Not even I'm legit excited, I should say, about
Living
Warcry.
vicariously through yourself.
Well, I mean,
This
people
is
were
Packer country.
so excited about Warcry that I got pretty pumped for it too. So it was fun to check that out, play a little bit of that, and take a look at that.
Do you have your sights set on anything?
It was Corvus Cabal is number one runner, but
Yeah.
I feel like there's so many people who are too creeped out by the Unmade that I almost need to do that. So I feel like I could put those on the table. I always have a soft spot for whatever warband no one else wants to do.
Yeah.
I've been doing that. I managed to get down to the ATC for Underworlds, and we did well down there, and that was cool.
Well,
Well,
I mean,
I would do a golf clap, but that's going to cause some spikes.
yeah.
Sure.
But been having a lot of fun there, and if you want to hear more about it, you can check out the What the Hex podcast. So
The What the Hex podcast.
What the Hex podcast?
what the heck's podcast?
But and my primary engagement with AOS so far has been enjoying the fiction. So digging through that and finding novellas and trying to catch myself up. At one point, I was totally current on all AOS fiction, and I would like to restore my status again.
Well, it got real tricky. Like last summer, they were
man.
coming out hot and heavy.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's sort of, I mean, for better or worse, it sort of died down a little bit. So it's offered opportunity to sort of catch up. I'm also behind, but I'm doing my best. Oh man, no, I'm talking and I can't stop.
Well, why don't you
what
tell
have
us
you been
more
doing?
about what you've been doing?
I can't help it. Honestly, it's just more goblin stuff. Very coincidental to this book. I didn't realize that this was lining up the way it is, but I'm working through the goblin half of, or the grot half of the Loom Curse set. Fortunately, it'll pull double duty for Warcry, because I think that's, between them and the Iron Jaws, probably what I'll end up playing. A lot of the new warbands are super cool, but like I already have too much plastic. I got to use the stuff I have already.
Shut your mouth.
I know.
No such
You're gonna
thing.
buy them
So
anyway. You know you're going to buy them
embarrassed.
anyway.
I don't know that I will. In fact, I did buy the starter set, and I'm probably going to try and offload some of it to at least some to this gentleman over here. But you're right. Honestly, every time I sell off a model, no joke, 100% of the time I proceed to go back and buy it separately later.
Yep.
It doesn't happen often, but it has happened every time I've sold it. So
It doesn't happen often, but it happens every time.
But it happens every time. 90% of the time, it
Mine just
happens every time.
doesn't-
Yeah. So that's what I'm working on. Also trying to get through, like, interspersed with the Grots, I'm trying to catch up with all the Underworld's war bands. I want to get those all put together, especially with Season 3 coming through. I don't know that I'll be able to have all the other ones put together, but I'd like to have as big a chunk as possible. So almost done with Profiteers. I'll probably move to Chosen Axes next. And that's me in a nutshell. Hey, Eric, tell me about your life.
All right. I mean, you guys have been keeping it pretty low key, but I'm hella excited for Warcry. Everybody's been pretty pumped about it, but I'd say I've intentionally been a primary instigator. When I see somebody get a little bit like not excited for it, I shape them up. But it's been a little contagious. Obviously, we've been big fans of skirmish play in the past, doing some campaigns and stuff. And when skirmish came out, not been as excited for that rule set, looking for campaign stuff around it. And the Warcry tone, the new models, the terrain, everything's just hitting the cylinders, the buttons for us. So we've been getting excited. And part of that, I guess, an announcement for this show is that over the next couple of months, we're going to be putting out 3 episodes of a new podcast on the topic of Warcry. And we're going to fit it in the stream, see how people like it, etc. And then if they do, we might keep that going and keep that running. So we're going to do 3 episodes. It's going to be kind of starter. It's going to be how the game plays. It's going to be lore, and kind of the way we do it, and then getting into some of our initial kind of campaign or new stuff.
And that'll be supplemental to our already existing content.
So we'll not take the place of this blessed story phase that everybody loves.
I was hoping I could take a break, though.
I mean, you can get out of here right now.
if you're already barely working, take a break.
But make sure you don't block anything because we need to get out later, right?
But just to let you know that's coming, and we're just going to be trying to do a bunch of different things to kind of get excited for it and play some of it and get a campaign going locally, share that, hype people up. And it's been fun being on Twitter with all that hype, and been fun seeing the game come together with Sam Pearson as one of the leads behind it with Jarvis Johnson. And Sam Pearson did Hinterlands a long time ago, which got us hooked on Skirmish Age of Sigmar. So excited to see and play along with that in the spirit. I found my copy of the Hinterlands, digging through some stuff, cleaning out the hobby space. And I just looked at it, I was like, we come a long way, boy. We come a long way. But yeah, so you can, we're very excited about Warcry. You can look forward to us trying to put our best narrative foot forward in trying to share that excitement and that experience with you, the listener.
Dear listener.
Dear listener. So that's me.
And I think that's everyone. So how about we hop into the story phase?
In the story phase, we delve into the stories, characters, creatures, and environments of the 9 realms. In the dark corners of the mortal realms, the mysterious Gloomspite Gits go to war, following the trail of their abominable deity. Nowhere is beyond the sight of the Bad Moon, not even those places under Sigmar's protection, like the city of Draconium, sweltering beneath the scalding rain of Akshi. In this boiling pot of tension, the Regent prays to Sigmar for guidance, while Captain Helena Morthan puts out fires, blades drawn in the streets, heretical doomsayers preaching the end of days, and insects eating watchmen alive. When the grieving warrior Hendrik and his warband arrive at the gates with a prophetic warning, Captain Morthan sees a way to save her people. But with Skagrat the Loon King plotting underneath Draconium, and the Bad Moon looming in the sky above, will there be a city left to save?
I feel like these are getting longer and longer every time we do these episodes. I mean, it's not that I don't like listening to you read them, but like you just read the whole book right there.
A little bit.
I mean, pretty soon.
And Eric only got 25% of the way through that?
Zing!
All right, let's start it at the beginning like we always do.
Wait a minute, goblins are in this?
No, Grots, right? You didn't even make it that far?
Which actually, I mean, we'll talk about it a little bit later, but that's a point of contention.
Poignant.
Sure, yeah.
Poignant.
All right, so we're gonna start like we always do when we do our Black Library book reviews with the spoiler-free section. We're talking about the facts, just the facts, and only the facts, so you don't have to worry about getting spoiled because that's the worst.
You still have a fax machine in here?
No, but I thought. Anyways, so let's start with the when and maybe the where, but the when. So what are we dealing with? I wish we had more like major events, or at least the books tied into the more major events, because I feel like the last like 12 that we've done have always been like, well, it's after the cities have been founded.
Yeah.
Just the general time frame. Like, I wish there was more points that we could like reference before or after.
Sure.
So I'm wondering, it's definitely after like the cities of the Mortal Realms have been founded. So when we know that range,
Well established
yeah,
at this
after
point.
the Realm Gate Wars, because we're dealing with a city, almost predominantly a city here. I wonder if we're also dealing with a time frame after the Necroquake, perhaps. It doesn't explicitly say one way or the other, but if we harken back to our Gloomspite book, Battle Tome, that is, didn't we read that like the Bad Mood was more active after the Necroquake? It sort of spurred it into more action. And if that's the case, spoiler alert, the Bad Moon factors into this book a little bit, and so because of that, I'm wondering if we're at post Necroquake. What do you guys think?
I think that this is where we can start to develop the timeline based on the battle tomes. As the storyline moves forward with each battle tome, we can say that this storyline has to be after the time of the battle tome with the Bad Moon, with the characters, because it is by necessity based in that era. So, as opposed to necessarily being able to do a specific timeline, we might be able to actually earmark where this is based on the release of the battle tome.
Okay, cool.
So use the meta.
Sure.
So yeah, I would agree. I'm comfortable saying it's post Necroquake and the Bad Moon's real angry.
And also bad. Yeah,
Very bad.
bad. Moon,
Bad to the bone.
stop being so bad.
Is there a Bad Moon Rising?
Absolutely. Don't sing it. Don't you sing it. It's also interesting that there was a point in time where, like, whenever a battle tome came out or like a new army release came out, like hot on the heels, they were doing novels that like sort of tied into that. Like there was a KO novel.
Sure.
There's that Legends of Sigmar with the Sylvaneth. So that was kind of a trend, and it sort of stopped for a while. So it's interesting to sort of see this Gloomspite book, still, months after the Battle Tome came out, but it kind of returned to form a little bit to have that focus of the Grots after the Battle Tome came out too. So I wonder if we'll start to see that trend return a little bit.
I would argue that actually has a very natural progression, because Andy Clark is the one who wrote the background for the Battle Tome.
Did he?
Yes, and he's the one who wrote Gloomspite. So I would imagine writing the background of the Battle Tome is what spurred him to the idea for the novel.
Sure.
Sport him.
He probably just was writing that Battle Tome and just couldn't stop. He just kept, like, the pen just kept writing, and he had to fill it out. Awesome. So that's the when. Let's talk about the where. Where are we, gentlemen?
Draconium.
Draconium's a town. It's in the realm of Akshi, and it's specifically somewhere north of Hammerhall, Aksha, right?
Correct. Yep,
Correct.
Yep. So something like 200 and blah, blah, blah miles north of Hammerhall, Aksha.
Yeah.
What's some interesting factoids about this city is that it's actually in the shadow of a volcanic mountain range. So, I mean, of course it is, right? You think every city probably in the realm of fire is probably within the shadows of a volcanic mountain range. So, but a feature or a bug of living so close to this mountain range is that there's always this acid rain falling down inside. Paul even mentioned in that little blurb that he read. So that lends a little bit of character to the city that we're dealing with. It's a volcanic town, and also always dealing with like acid rain. So like the structure and the architecture of this place sort of has to take that into account, and they have to sort of survive under that environmental factor.
We're not talking about like acid rain that you get from too much CO emissions. We're talking about acid rain that if you spend all night uncovered in the rain, you will be scarred in the morning.
Yeah, and some people are, right? So like it colors the population a little bit too. Why would you laugh? That's messed up.
Because
man.
it colors
man.
the people, because it wounds them, so it changes the color of their skin.
Yeah, those people are hurting. Like
Wow.
they need medical attention.
These people aren't real.
Where's your
Hey,
empathy,
hey.
Paul?
But we can also take that this is basically a little bit of a frontier area. It's an area that we haven't explored before.
Yeah, they like refer to it as like a shield city or something, which is to say, I think it probably serves as like one of the farthest reaches of like quote unquote civilization.
Sure.
Of this area. And it's interesting that like a canal runs between Draconium and, man, that's a long canal, to Hammerhall. Like, so they have like a connection. They are sort of not interdependent, because I'm sure Hammerhall doesn't think of Draconium, but like they are related in that regard. Any other wares you guys want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is not a storm hold here, and they make a point of kind of talking that it's far enough away from Hammerhall that it doesn't have the luxury of all of the storm hosts, etc. but it does seem to be some place of import that what's his name? The guy who's in charge.
The Regent Militum.
So, I mean, seems to have done something of import and
Sure. No,
has this pretty audacious place.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's noteworthy that they don't have any sort of Stormcast presence, but at the same time, it is a city. Like a town probably doesn't do it justice. I think it is a fully fledged urban area. So
yeah, it's big enough that people, not everybody, the population doesn't know everybody. There's enough, nooks and crannies, and kind of you can't be everywhere at once or know everything that's going on. They have a city watch, and they have a military presence.
Crawling good, it does them. Yeah. What? All right, so let's talk about the who are our major players here. So this book is fun in that there is a variety of point of view characters. What was the last one we read? We read Scourge of Fate, which was a singular, almost a singular perspective. But it's nice to have that refreshing take to get a bunch of different people's perspectives. So we are offered with a wide range of point of views. But the main point of view characters that I think we're probably most interested in are one, Hendrik Saul, which I think Paul mentioned in his little blurb, and that dude basically leads a mercenary group. And this little factoid of this book is probably my favorite part in that I loved the wide range of characters that were sort of under his employ.
Sure.
So he's a human mercenary.
Swords of Sigmar.
Swings a big hammer. So he's pretty cool in his own right, but he has collected, not to give too much away, collected a range of folks under his employ for the Swords of Sigmar.
And what we find out immediately is that he's not the leader before this book starts.
Sure, correct. He's sort of thrust into a leadership position.
The circumstances put him in this position. He's a reluctant and maybe not good at it. Not necessarily that likable or person that you would expect.
I liked him.
I mean,
we're cool. And just to rattle off the types of folks that he's working with, he's got a Caradhran Overlord, he's got a Way Watcher. There's
I bet you like that.
I sure did. An engineer from
Ironweld.
Yeah, exactly. There's like a Death Sorcerer, and then there's this like scout native of like Akshi,
Old Shen.
Yeah, exactly. Who has no sort of equivalent in the range.
So a priestess of Sigmar?
Yeah. A warrior priest as well.
Romilla.
Yep, exactly. So these are all like cool. Like it's a fun way to sort of bring in these disparate, all order, but for the most part, like different walks of life characters, and just sort of get their perspectives on. The plot is one of my favorite parts, and we do get their perspectives going through. Every once in a while, we'll get their point of view. Additionally, there's that Helena Morthan, which Paul also mentioned, and so she's the captain of the City Watch. And any good city's got to have that City Watch, and so she's tasked with protecting the city. And then, of course, as you might expect, as things start to go south, she's going to be the one that you go to help solve the problems.
She's specifically the interior of the city, and there's the militia militant who are responsible for the outer defenses. So you think of her as like the law enforcement.
Sure.
Kind of.
Yeah. Well, and this book sort of takes that, at least for part of it, like that detective story tone, right? Where she's like, she's on the case, there's a mystery to be solved. And so there is that sense, at least for part of the book, that you're sort of drawn in and you're sort of investigating the mystery alongside her. So.
I remember quite vividly that like she's worked her way up. I feel like I read it just recently. That she started off kind of on the beat, and kind of gained that trust, gained the notoriety, and has become captain out of earning it kind of thing. And she definitely has a care for the city. Like this is something she is devoted to. So
it's not like one of those. This was her last day on the force.
No, she wasn't about to retire.
Retire now. And
I'm
also
too old for this.
Also, at no point does anyone ask her for her badge and her gun either. Yeah. You're too wild. You're out of control. None of that. All right. So we got through that pretty quick. Those are the facts. Are there any other factoids or any whats that you guys want to talk about?
One of the things that Andy Clark mentioned specifically about this book is he calls it a survival horror novel. So this is a new type of story for AOS, right? So this starts to portion in where this novel is not just a novel by Andy Clark, but it's kind of a new addition to the AOS Black Library range, in my opinion. And there are a couple of things that are important to know to read this book. One of them is that it is a survival horror story. So it is not a normal fantasy novel. So it's going to be a little bit different from any other AOS Black Library novel that you've read. I think that's pretty safe to say. And the second thing is that although the novel is titled Gloomspite, grots don't necessarily feature heavily in this novel. So if you're looking for a Gloomspite-centric novel, and that's your main reason for reading it, this may not be the book for you.
And to be fair, like I feel like this is a consistent thing with Black Library, where like Clan Pestilence that came out, and I would say 70% of the point of view of that book was coming from order, sort of thing. So it's not, that did not surprise me at all. I thought it was possible that we might have a novel that was entirely from the perspective of a grot or something like that, but.
It did surprise me, and I can't say why it surprised me. One of my thoughts was, I think that's from the old world. The Skarsnik novel was so widely well received and regarded that like people were clamoring for like a grot perspective. For whatever reason, I thought that this was going to be another one of those. There's no real reason why I got that in my head, but so because of that, I think I was also surprised, maybe in the same vein that Paul was, that I thought this probably was going to be a grot perspective book. I wasn't necessarily disappointed that it wasn't, but that was subverted my expectations, I think.
Well, and the reason that that's a connection in my mind is that Skarsnik was also a survival horror novel, to my understanding.
So this is not new.
It's not new to Black Library, but it is new to AOS because that was an old world novel.
All right.
So that would be the differentiation that I would make.
Sure. Maybe we read Skarsnik next. And
I
then,
love Skarsnik. It's one of my favorite books.
oh, good.
Interesting. We're going
Don't
to
write
return to
checks. You can't cash, buddy.
That's true. So and furthermore, I'd maybe stress that like although the caption features heavily in the book, I think really where we spend a lot of our time is actually with the swords of Sigmar. It's very much this I don't say adventuring party, this mercenary party. It's a lot of their book, I would say, which I don't think that gives away too much.
No.
Well, I feel like if you liked City of Secret and
Spear of Shadows,
where you've got that ragtag bunch, like this is right in line with that, and it does give you the opportunity to get to know these different characters from these different different units that you play on the table or that you read in the battle tomes, but get down to a human level, right?
Yeah.
So
And it's these units that like maybe don't feature too heavily in like battle. Well, I guess we're getting Cities of Sigmar now, but like up until this point haven't really featured too heavily in different battle tomes, and so like maybe it's these books are the only opportunity to get a sense of what a Waywatcher is like in these books, or what a Warrior Priest is like in the world.
Well, and I think with that announcement of Cities of Sigmar coming out, this is very much a representation of that operation and how cities would work, or how, and just how people are dealing with being in the realms, being mortal, being a melting pot of different cultures and stuff, trying to adapt.
Sure.
So I think it's.
I know the feeling. Yeah,
totally.
you always got to adapt with you people. Anyways, so those are the facts. Any other facts? All right, awesome. Before we get into the spoiler-filled section, let's give a real quick recommendation or not recommendation. What did you guys think of the book? I'm going to lead with Paul because he just gave me the biggest smile in the world.
I will be honest, this is not my genre. This is not my type of book.
Not your Gloomspite.
So that throws me a little bit. And here's why. Because I assume that, because I knew you were not hot on it, and I was like, oh, survival horror, that makes sense. But you liked Skarsnik, which is apparently also survival horror.
Yep.
So that feels incongruous to me.
That's fair, and we can definitely talk about
yourself,
why
Paul.
I don't feel that's incongruous as we're discussing the plot going forward.
All right.
Okay, gotcha.
But yeah, to me, I had a hard time with this book. If you are looking for a grot story, I thoroughly enjoyed Boss Grot, which is a short story from Black Library, and I would highly suggest checking that out. If you like Andy Clark novels, this is very much an Andy Clark novel, and you will love this book. It's just not my personal style, not my personal favorite. Let's put it that way.
Cool.
I did like most of the other Andy Clark stuff that I bought, or not most. I liked all the other Andy Clark stories that I read. I just did not
So
particularly enjoy
you're the
this
exception to your own rule.
one. I am the exception to my own rule.
Yeah.
Surprise, surprise.
You know what? Let's put that on Paul's tombstone.
To his own rule. He's the exception that proves the rule.
Wait, you can't put me in a box. That should be on the tombstone.
Oh god, he's always thinking outside the box. Anyways, I'll cut that. All right, Davey. In stark contrast, tell me what you thought.
Enjoyed it greatly. I felt like maybe it took me a while to ease into it. Like it felt like it took a while to warm up to. But I won't necessarily say this is my favorite Black Library novel so far. It was up there.
Oh, wow.
It's in the conversation, and I say that because it was the most page turning for me. Once I got into the latter half, it was most like that I wanted to come back and find out what happened next.
Sure.
In quite a while, in recent memory, I could not think of an example off the top of my head that was more of a page turner than this one for me. So
Cool. Erica, what you read?
So what I liked about what I read is that one of the things that Games Workshop does really well is gives you little snippets of things and gives you peeks into things. Doesn't give you everything, but gives you like a lot of flavor in a small bite. And in this book, like in this first 25%, we're in 3 different locations with a dozen people, with a bunch of different little experiences, and each one of them so flavorful. So, from the initial kind of events that kind of introduce us to these characters is to me was riveting, and then getting to this the little scene of like, wait a minute, is this the bad guy here? And then getting redirected to what it's like going into the opulence of the ruler's place. Just all these little places just gave you so much flavor. So I'm excited to hear how it ended.
Well, we will be here to tell you, to reveal that to you.
And if you do a bad job, I'll read it myself.
If only.
What if we?
If only.
Oh my god, that would make my day. No, what if we just like gave you the wrong, just went the wrong direction entirely? Yeah. What did I think about the book? I think Paul hit the nail on the head in that, like, this is not a typical Black Library AOS book. This is very different, and because of that, if that were the only thing about it, then I would say that was worth reading just to get a different perspective or a different type of novel.
And I would say that maybe that's a little where I'm coming from. Like, I'm a sucker for anyone who can subvert expectations.
Yeah,
so I think that probably warmed me to it.
Yep, definitely unique. We're not dealing with major armies, facing off across the battlefield, which honestly in AOS we're getting less and less of that too. We're getting a lot of human stories, and this is yet another one. But this sort of survival aspect of it is new to me, and I liked the breath of fresh air. Now, if I read if there was another one, like another book in the same vein, maybe I wouldn't like the continuation of it. But this was a good. I was gonna say palate cleanser, but that'd be a weird palate that you'd have to cleanse.
Palate dirtier?
Yeah, exactly. So because of that, I liked it. Davey's right. I was on the edge of my seat quite a bit, but I feel like that's also the nature of this sort of survival horror. It was a real page turner, and there was always something happening. The first half maybe started off a little slow, but once it got going, it was going, and there was always something new.
Sure.
And they were always in a new place, and there was always action going on. So I think maybe it's worth the wait. If you can get through the beginning parts. But even to Eric's point, like it still was interesting, like in the first half.
Yeah, I mean, my block was literally time, not interest. I was reading this every chance I got in between phone calls, or if I was waiting for a website to load, I was flipping this open to see what was going on next. And like I said, even in this amount of time, like I have a really good feel for like what's happening in a small village, in an outpost town. There's just a lot of that, I know what these guys call like a cycle of the sun.
Sure.
Prove
it.
I will later.
Okay, cool. Spoilers, we can't tell you.
Can't tell you. Listen more to find out.
But in the same vein, I was sort of expecting it to be from like a Grop perspective, and I guess if that's what you think going into it, you're going to be disappointed because that's not necessarily what you get. because of that, maybe I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of a Grau perspective. I mean, we see plenty of books where you they play both sides. That's not really what we see here. But I won't hold that against it. I still liked it. So cool, good book. All right, let's move on.
Moving on up to the east side.
Well, no, my friend, to the spoiler phase.
Oh.
Hey everybody, this is Aaron. And I'm joined here with your favorite members of the Mortal Realms, which is to say everybody besides me.
Hi.
Oh.
So low.
And we kind of have an announcement in this episode that we wanted to talk to you a little about. Some news. We're starting a Patreon because we felt weird for not having one, right? Like in this day and age, everybody's got one.
Yeah, that's what we started a podcast because everyone else did. Now we're going to do the Patreon because everyone else is.
That's not true. Everybody else started a podcast because you guys started the podcast.
We didn't start the podcast. It was always burning since the world's been turning.
As long as you don't sing it, it's fine. No dollar.
Oh, come on.
Yep. So we are starting a Patreon. You can find us at patreon.com/themortalrealms or themortalrealms.com/Patreon.
Hi, get behind our / Patreon.
Get out of here. It's perfectly balanced as all things should be. So
pattern.
Give it a shot. And we got just a couple levels. Honestly, we're trying to make this as simple and streamlined as possible. So there's like a $1 level, which is just your tip jar equivalent. Like if you like what we're doing, which why get better taste.
You deserve to lose $1 if you like
right?
what we're doing.
We should take it from you. Drop us that buck just to let us know. Honestly, it's just a nice way to let us know that you appreciate us because we do it for validation.
A special shout out to the member of Clan Eshin who got a gnaw hole and figured out that we had a Patreon already and has already been donating.
Oh, sure. Yep, that's Philip. Throw out a shout out to Philip for being the first of our patrons who found it, even though we did not announce it. So that means he had to be looking for it. He must have listened to the show and thought, "Man, I want to give these dudes money."
So we're technically only doing what people want us to do.
Yeah.
So now it's all what Philip wants.
It's Patreon's for you, Philip.
Yeah. You can't see, but I'm giving you the fist bump.
Yep.
I can hear it, though.
He contributed before we even knew that was possible. We thought we would just open an account.
Yeah.
Yep.
We didn't know it was even
And actually, we got the one we're validated that concludes our Patreon.
Maybe he should be in charge of this whole thing. He was smarter than we are. Come on.
So should we get him on the horn? Like, is he now a member of the Mortal Realms?
I don't know. There weren't rules written when he joined, so he gets to write them, I guess.
So there's that the $1 level, and then there's also the $5 level, which seems excessive, but
It's like we don't owe you nothing.
Yeah, exactly. that gets you access to a super secret channel on our Discord. Let me remind you, we do have a Discord that is open to all. To any and all comers are welcome in our Discord. But if you want to join the super secret, what do I call it, Free Guild channel, if you join that level, you can get access. And I think what we'll do there is
ironically not free.
But that Discord you can find at themortalrealms.com/Discord. But in this new channel,
Get behind our /
yeah, absolutely. In this new channel, we'll be reaching out to you folks and get maybe a more closer relationship to find out what you like about the show, and maybe we'll reach out to get your advice or your take on what we should be doing in the future. Any money that you donate generally is probably just for the most part going to be hosting. Like we have a couple like streams now, and we're hosting a website, and so this is starting to sort of add up. And our hopes is maybe we might expand to different streams or other types of content, and those will have costs associated with them as well. So the idea being that we would hope to try to defray some of that hosting. So very much it would be appreciated on our end, and it'll help us do more content that you may or may not like. You better like it. So help me.
Yeah. And we're not necessarily going to do any more streams. You can't hold us to it.
Well, sure. No, this is just our thoughts. We got to cover our first streams first.
Well, and no guarantees on actually listening to your feedback. We didn't even know we had a Patreon forever. So, I mean, let's just make sure you don't meet expectations.
I'll tell you what, in closing, maybe it's for the best that you don't donate. So, all right. So with that, let's get back to the episode. Bye. Well, guys, in the spoiler phase, we're going to talk about the spoilers in this book, basically beginning to end, and not end to beginning, because that'd be backwards. All right, let's start at the beginning. This is yet another book that starts with a prologue. Eric's raising his hand. He wants to talk about something.
I want to preface before we start talking about the actual plot.
I'm sorry, my phone was in front of you, and I couldn't see your double hands
No worries.
being raised. Yeah.
So I'm going to preface my review of this book with, number one, my expectations were super high for a sequel version of Skarsnik.
Yeah, I figured that was what's going on. You had a very firm set of what you wanted, and when it wasn't what you wanted.
I had a very firm set of exactly what I wanted out of this book, and this was not that book. That's not any fault of Andy Clark. That's just my expectations were not in the right place.
We always expect it to be your fault, Paul.
That's fair. That's very fair.
He owns it.
Yeah.
So Andy Clark, you're off the hook this time.
Yeah. So I had a hard time with the book from that perspective alone. And Skarsnik is legitimately one of my favorite books. I probably read it 4 or 5 times. And not even just like Warhammer books. It's just legitimately one of my favorite books. And so that was always going to be a hard act to follow. Mm-hmm. And with the title being Gloomspite, and with Gratz not featuring heavily, my disappointment was self-appointed. Let's put it that way, right? Mm-hmm. So now that I've established that that's where I'm coming from with this book, let's start with the prologue.
Andy Clark should have wrote Skarsnik too. Electric Boogaloo. All right, so this book starts with a prologue, which is sort of, as you guys may know, a prologue is sort of a pre-chapter, which is odd. I don't know why it needed to be a prologue. Why couldn't it have just been chapter 1? Because what we're doing is we're dealing with the characters that we're going to follow for the rest of the book. But they are in a village, a small town, I don't know, somewhere in the realm of Akshi, and we're in the thick of it. It's getting hot and heavy because the villagers are being, I don't know, attacked by a monster, a crowned monster.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And we find out throughout this prologue that it turns out that this monster actually at one point was the leader of the Swords of Sigmar.
The leader of the pack?
Yeah, leader of the pack. That group, that mercenary group that we were talking about. I don't know what that means.
The Swords of Sigmar, leader of the pack?
No,
it's a song.
David's
it's revving the throttle.
It's
Revving
in the song.
Sure. Like you're like, Aaron, turn it down. With your whole fist. So apparently, we find out here or later that Varlin Salt, so he was the leader. Apparently, at one point, they're on a mission. They dug, they breached a dreadhold. They found a crown.
A dreadhold, no less.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that speaks to the efficacy of these folks, this mercenary group. They found a crown, and what do you do when you find a crown in a dreadhold? Obviously, you put it on your dumb head. Yeah. It's the sort of crown that doesn't come off. The worst kind of crown, or the best kind of crown. And lo and behold, it's like a weird mushroom crown, like we see, it's sort of throughout the. No, it's like Skagrok's crown, isn't it? Like it's got like mushrooms and stuff on it, or like grows into his skull. It does.
I think this part's going to be.
It fuses to his head.
I think this part's going to be cut out because it's from a dreadhold. I think it was supposed to be a chaos artifact.
Yeah.
Oh, is that it? I thought it was like a...
Well, and that's why I think this part is supposed to be a prologue, because it's about chaos, and then we move into the actual survival horror part.
Okay, I'll own up to it. Maybe I'm wrong.
I think you're wrong.
I don't remember them specifically mention mushrooms.
Sure.
But there's some implication that, like, he's getting insight from this crown, and he, at first I don't think they realize that he can't take it off. I think they think he's just choosing not to take it off.
It's a sweet-ass crown. Sweet butt crown.
You love those sweet butt crowns.
He mutates. He turns into a monster. And it was kind of gradual. I don't think it was an immediate thing, because they went from the dreadhold. He started kind of speaking a bit and telling about things, and then when they got to the city, that
suddenly chaos spawned out hardcore.
Yep.
Oh, okay. So I was thinking he was a weird mushroom creature. I didn't realize he was a chaos spawn creature.
Spawn.
So he starts murdering and killing, and so the townspeople are got spear. I've read this recently, guys.
Every episode starts out this way.
The townspeople are trying to hold this thing back and try and eliminate it, and they end up burning him with fire and killing him with stuff.
I mean, what's worse is he sets the townspeople convince his mercenary group to also aid in the fight against him.
Yeah, so, the tension at the beginning of the book is that Hendrik is still trying to save him.
Yep.
Sure.
Right.
And that is a big barrier to get across, is having Andy Clark convince you that this character is looking at this chaos spawn and being like, oh man, like maybe this is salvageable, whatever like that. I felt like that was a tough obstacle to get over. But yeah.
What do you think he did?
I think he did as well as he could possibly do in that, like that, because this thing looks horrific, right? Like it's, one eye is on a stalk and the other one is like multifaceted. I don't know.
Like a mushroom stalk, though?
Absolutely not.
And in those last moments, Varlin is trying to communicate things. He's repeating things, and Hendrik is kind of listening to it. And he's speaking words that seem extra. It's not about what's happening right now. It's about some warning, some portents, and he doesn't know what to do.
Malign portents?
Perhaps. And they
different type of portent, actually.
Oh, sorry.
And so they end up helping, the swords end up helping kill Varlin reluctantly, but they decide to save this village instead of their comrade.
Sure.
And then they are able to stay. The townspeople kind of let them stay the night.
Yeah, you got the rest of the night, and then we're kicking you out because you brought this guy in here, and he killed a bunch of us, and that's uncool.
No, thank you.
So there's a ton of that kind of like, hey, we were happy to have you here. Now we're not happy to have you here. So just that interesting politics of being a traveler in a city in the realms.
And we have the introduction of the characters of the main party here, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah,
And
some of them are not. I mean, you just have a little bit, but sure.
But the first thing is they introduced the priestess of Sigmar.
Romilla Aiden.
And this is a new character for AOS Black Library that we have a priestess. I don't believe we've had one before.
Spear of Shadows, what's her name?
But she was a sister of Sigmar. I don't know if she was a priestess.
I think she's a warrior priest. She's swinging a hammer around.
Semantics. Yeah.
Okay, but fair. So we have a priestess of Sigmar.
Shaved head, scarred up.
Yep. So she's definitely war-torn. And then we also have this Akshi native.
Yeah, Old Shiv.
Yep.
Davey said it before.
Who has all these scars and tattoos. That function almost as a fire slayer a bit, to give kind of an idea. They glow when he uses them. And then we have this death sorcerer,
Barterman Cotrin,
who is the magic user of the group, as it were. And then we also have a Caradron overlord,
Boric Jorgensen,
who is this mercenary, right? It's brought out that even in this mercenary group, this Caradron is a mercenary within the group itself.
Yeah, it kind of serves as like a bodyguard for the Salt Brothers.
For Varlin.
Yep.
So Varlin and Hendrik are brothers. I don't know if we specifically mentioned that.
I was thinking, I don't know if we said it. Yeah, that's why he cared that much.
That's why he cared so much. So Varlin and Hendrik are brothers. Varlin is the leader at the beginning of the book.
Well, keep going down the list. You were doing so well.
And then we also have the Waywatcher.
Yeah. Aelin, Malethril. Also, I can do this all day.
Yeah.
Davey and I are just sitting over here chill, watching the struggle.
And then we have a female Ironweld engineer.
Sure. Eleonora Van Giest,
So
who is legit.
the prologue not only tells us where the motivation is coming for this group, but it also gives us a very small introduction to who the members of this party are. It very much feels like, to me, an opening adventure for like AOS RPG, where you have to come up with something to make all the characters come together, and this is the entry level adventure, right?
You know what? Like, yeah, that's actually. I mean, like, what a great intro
Except
adventure!
for they
Like,
just smashed into a dreadhole.
No, I was gonna say kill your old boss kind of thing, right? Like,
and
that's a
I
cool
would
thing.
actually say, I mean, to that point, I would say, I mean, to use it, I think these guys are like level 15. Like
Yeah, they're not level 1 characters.
They're not.
Sure.
They haven't forced these people together. They certainly at the beginning tell you that these disparate people are together, and they don't give you much explanation in the prologue. As we get into closer to the city, or they're deciding what to do with what Varland spouted, we finished this job. We need to go to the people who are going to pay us for it. Right? There's this artifact belongs to somebody. So we've got a job to finish, but we've got this warning.
Yeah.
And that first thing you get is this dynamic that without their leader, they're spiraling as a group.
Yeah.
That they want to turn to Hendrik, but they didn't sign up under Hendrik, right? He didn't hire them. And that conflict between being a mercenary, being a decent human being, what do we owe the realms?
Or Dwarden or Elf.
Or Dwarden or Elf. I don't mean to be speciest. And so that instant, like within that first part, we've got a dynamic in the group that we've been through a lot of stuff. but that doesn't mean we're going to keep getting to, like we're going to be able to work together moving forward.
Yeah.
And then as they get, so they decide, not as a group, not everybody agrees, but Hendrik takes control and says, I'm going to step up to what my brother did. We're going to go to Draconium, and we're gonna give this warning. And the priestess Ramilla, she's like, this has to be for Sigmar. She gets behind him. The elf, the Way Watcher is a second command. Mm-hmm. The party says, yes, we're gonna go.
Well, and it's very much a sense of like, we're not gonna let Varlin's death sort of be in vain, or the folks who agree anyways are like, all right, well, this has to mean something. There has to be some meaning to Varlin's death. So this will our sort of last honor to our fallen leader.
Yeah, and Mr. Jorgensen is that tension in the group who says, look, we finished what we were assigned to do, right? So this Dreadhold contained a treasure, and they have this treasure now. And he keeps insisting, we need to just finish our mission first. And Hendrik says, no, we have a new mission now that supersedes our previous one. So right from the get-go, we have this tension already where there is a member of the group, the mercenary who protected Varlin, who was supposed to protect Varlin, and the rest of the group. I mean, legitimately, the beginning chapter, the bodyguard is the one who fails to be the bodyguard and becomes the person who says that everything is wrong.
So you're a big Boric fan, it sounds like. All right, so they decide they're going to head to the city and deliver this warning, this prophecy. What a noble bunch. All right, let's go to chapter 1 where the book officially kicks off, and we're introduced to a character that we never see again. Where we follow this Tobias Kench, who's a city watchman at Draconium. Apparently, he's not the super nicest guy. He beats up hoodlums in a bar, and on his patrol or what have you, he discovers a hole in an alleyway. Mm-hmm. And this alleyway leads into like a bar cellar. Like this is an urban area, right? So he's walking amongst the city buildings, finds a hole that leads to a bar cellar. Of course, he's going to investigate it because he's a nosy little dude. And he finds a hidden space and some more tunnels, like in the cellar of this bar. So he thinks he's onto something, like he's finding some smugglers or something like that, and that really excites him because he seems like that sort of kind of guy.
He's pretty smug about it.
Yeah, real smug. And lo and behold, this is our first introduction that like things aren't what they seem in the city, and he's ambushed by some unseen forces or what have you. I wonder what they could possibly be. Who knows, man? We'll never know.
We'll never know.
Guys, I want to know.
Sure.
Yeah.
So it was odd choice, I guess. Maybe not to start the book off this way from this character that like we meet and then never see again for obvious reasons in one chapter. I guess it sets the stage or sets the tone.
It does set the tone of you're gonna have people that are gonna have problems.
Sure.
Right?
It just
it tells you. I think it tells you a little bit about the city too. How the Watch relates to its people, and it seems like the Watch are framed as the mainline defense. The captain it's her job to say this, and these are the kinds of people she has to work with.
I will say I did not bat an eye. I thought it felt like Black Library sort of thing.
Sure.
Like,
gotcha.
I established some danger by
Wrong again, Aaron.
Sure. So apparently,
score.
apparently Tobias is Davy's favorite character. All right, moving right along. Here we're finally introduced to the Helena Morthen, that captain of the Watch that we were talking about before. So she, honestly, does much happen in this chapter?
So this goes to the captain. She's getting these reports because this watchman has disappeared. We find out that this isn't the first incident of something like this, and so she's with her kind of second in command who helps her out.
Taverton Grange.
Yeah, he's a little bit comes from wealth, so he's maybe in his position from favor, privilege. Whereas again, she's earned it, and so there's a little bit of difference there. But he's very respectful.
Yeah, well, and this was a real minor note, but this is one of the things that made me like this book a little bit more. Was it was going to be real easy to trope this guy. Oh, he's from nobility. He doesn't know what he's doing. He just has this job because of his social status, and he's really bad at it, and we hate him because he's bad at it, and he doesn't deserve that.
Kind of predict that, he's going to be a problem later.
Sure. Yeah. But even in this initial thing, she finds things that she doesn't like about him, things that she does like about him. And I thought that was cool to just introduce nuance in a tertiary character here,
Yep.
quaternary character. I don't
So
know
so together they're trying to plot out kind of, you can imagine they've got stuff spread out, reports, trying to pin red string from one to the other or whatever.
He's like, this is the craziest thing I've seen in my entire career, and she's like, you've been on 10 months, son. And like,
And they can't quite figure it out. So they do this interesting thing. They're like, get the sages on this, or the scribes, have them come down and look at it and see if they can figure it out. We're going to go hit the streets and do the job.
Pound some pavement.
And they come to somebody comes to him and says, oh, so and so was kind of reprimanded for shouting nonsense about the end of days or something like that. And she's like, well, who was it? And recognizes this person. And they go down there and they have this interesting dialogue where Grange is like, it's just this, crazy person, quote unquote. And she's like, well, do you remember this thing that happened? He predicted that.
yeah.
You remember this other thing? Yep, he warned us about that. Like, there's other things that he says that aren't true, but the things that have happened, he's talked about it. So we're going to go check him out.
It's old Enwyn Posver.
Yep.
Posver.
But yeah, I think there was also a mention that he was relocated by request, that there is the higher power saying, he's making kind of a noise. We don't really need that right now.
There's an instance where she hears that, like, this is one of the points where they humanize her and show like how much she cares about the city itself by treating this vagabond and as like somebody she cares about. So if she cares about the lowliest, right, she cares about everybody. So she goes to speak with him. He feels, gets the information about some ominous thing coming in. Does he mention the bad moon?
Not the bad moon specifically. He speaks vaguely about this, ominous threat to the city, and as the vaguest and best prophecies always are, that like there are no specifics. But he seems real worked up about it, right? Like this is very real to him, and so they take the information that he has and sort of allay his fears. Some
of these other things are like violent outbreaks. One group starts kind of spouting off weird kind of things that they're seeing that aren't there, and another group attacks them, thinking that they're against this other crazy thing that they're talking about. People are getting fungus outbreaks.
Sure, people are getting eaten by like insects.
They come across a body of another watchman that was just big old centipede crawls right out from inside of it.
There's your giant centipede model right there.
I know.
It's coming.
Sure. And so they take their leave of him, sort of like they've got what they can, and they're investigating other. That's where the giant
body.
centipede. Yep. Yeah, exactly. But then they get a report like soon thereafter. He's like, hey, Captain, that dude you were just talking to? Yeah. What about him? He lit himself on fire. Like he straight up killed himself.
Yeah.
Because that's how terrified of the future, or like the next phase of this ominous threat. He'd rather self-immolate.
He either both wanted to leave or wanted to make sure that like what he was saying was taken seriously.
I didn't think of it that way.
He
Maybe.
expired.
Oh,
jeez.
Often self-immolation is a statement of like,
yeah, that's true.
Take me seriously.
An excuse to make a joke. Yeah.
Should not take things seriously. You can see things. This is very clear now that things are not all right in the city. We're getting a larger perspective.
This one is the first thing that shocked me. I was not expecting somebody goes missing, but having that like a civilian something like that happen, there's something real wrong.
Sure.
Well, and
rotten in Denmark.
From a like allegorical sense, right? He sets himself on fire. We're in the realm of fire, so it almost proves the truth, as it were, of what he's saying, because he becomes one with the realm.
I'm surprised he wasn't already on fire, living in the realm of fire. Like, isn't everybody like just sort of a little smoky? All right, so let's cut back to our friends in the Swords of Sigmar.
He puts out fires all the time.
They do finally arrive to Draconium, wielding their prophecy. They're all ready to share it to anybody who's going to listen. Unfortunately, they're rebuffed. I was going to say debuffed, but that's WoW, which is coming out soon. And they're rebuffed at the closed gates. Apparently,
and then cows were catapulted over.
That's true. And they fart in their general direction. But they're not allowed in the city. Apparently, the city is on lockdown for these reasons, I guess, that we've talked about. Like, there's some weird stuff going on, and they're not about to let the outsiders into the city. So the gates are all locked. They can't even get any audience initially with anybody of any import.
There's a barge guy who's like, "Good luck, son. We've been waiting out here forever."
Sure, and we're on a barge, right? Everybody respects the barge.
Can't you barge right in?
Get out here. Paul wants to say something.
We're missing that pretty cool little thing at the beginning of each chapter.
I wouldn't say I'm missing it, Paul.
There's a nursery rhyme. So in chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3,
Real cool.
there is a nursery rhyme set into the mortal realms. That is the beginning of the chapters.
Is it of the parts or every chapter?
It might be the parts, actually. I apologize.
Yeah.
That is this, for essence, a normal person's understanding of what a Gloomspite Git would be. So it's kind of a cool little touch to humanize, as it were, or contextualize.
Yeah, I mean,
what's
like
going on.
we've got old nursery rhymes that have to do with trolls and cutting off heads and things like that. It's one of those creepy ones from back in the day, and I think it's one of those things that flushes out or likens this time period with medieval or times in our own history.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, and it also sets the context. So we have these attacks, we have these problems, and even though we can say what's going on, they don't have any answer for what it actually could be.
Well, I guess this is where we get like those nursery rhymes tell us what's happening.
Yep.
The people have no clue. Like in the story, in the narrative, in the dialogue, nobody has an idea.
Yeah. So it's not like somebody's like, "Oh, it could be grots." People don't even acknowledge that grots exist. Right.
It's very there's that parallel back to the old world. Well, people didn't think Skaven existed, right? It's very similar to that concept. It's also weird to think that like you have lived in the mortal realms long enough. Like some weird stuff happened. You would think this is on lockdown and we're going to solve this problem. And like I don't know, people are getting eaten by bugs all the time.
This is one of the things I think about AOS, and as we read these stories, is that while Age of Sigmar, like there's real gods, there are realm gates, etc., one's experience might like they like what in one of the parts of the chapter we'll talk about. They said they're 2 days from the nearest realm gate, right? So they know about realm gates. There may be parts of the realms where people have heard of realm gates, but there's the distance, because the realms are so huge, the distance is so great that it may be a myth, right? So one place they can see it, it's very tangible, it's real. Another place they've never experienced anything like that, and there's so many things in the realms that in one place you might think that grots are a nursery rhyme. Someplace else, that's your food source, and walking trees is a myth, right? Some people have seen gods. Some people are very skeptical of that.
That's a good point, and that makes the mortal realms all that more appealing. I guess is the variety of perspectives and like experience that like the people have. Like right in the same way that the folks who live in Shyish are used to seeing the dead. Where like to your point, folks in actually like if they saw a skeleton walking around, they'd be terrified. Like why is that dude up and moving? Good point. I like that. All right. So eventually our party is sitting outside the gates. They're constantly sort of shouting, "Hey, we've got this important information. We got to get it to somebody important." I'll say important one more time. And they don't seem to be making any headway, but eventually one of the guards on the gates who hears that they have info.
I would say this is one of the points where Hendrik is just ineffective. He's not a good communicator. He's still trying to figure out what his role is here. He's not his brother.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, somebody says, "Hey, numbnuts."
Well, they eventually catch the ear of the captain of the city watch, or the message gets relayed, and so she already gets a sense that something's amiss in town, and so any information related to that, as we sort of found with that prophet, she's willing to at least hear them out. So she does come to the gate, or they're brought to the captain because she's willing to hear what this prophecy is. It seems out of the ordinary, and so they relate it to her.
But even when they're packed at the city gates waiting to get in, they already start to feel the effects of this acid rain, right? So they're starting to have to cover up, and the actual soldiers themselves are covering up. And you were really excited about the coats and the stuff they were using.
Andy Clark does a few things where he invents some terminology or invents some things that are a part of the everyday lives of these people. And so one of them is called a scald shade, which is basically an umbrella made of leather that's been treated with ointments in order to protect against kind of wear and tear from the acid rain. And so just kind of like one of those things where we would say, umbrella, they're, have a name. It's this cool thing that protects them.
And it's not only the umbrellas and their coats, but also the actual buildings themselves are coated in this.
Yeah, the walls have like an oil or
Yep. And then there is a type of rock that is resistant to it, but very few things in the actual city are made from that type of rock.
Which seems dumb. You should make everything out of that rock.
You would think.
Yeah.
So it's a minor problem.
I get it. You guys get it. Anyways, the city watch captain, Helena, so she hears them out, and so this hearing their story gives her an idea, right? So she's been trying to convince the actual ruler of this town, which is the regent militant. She's trying to convince him that there's something afoot here, and that it requires more resources, but she doesn't seem to be making any headway with him.
And some of it, she's been having these awful nightmares, right? And something with this prophet said something that kind of corresponds. She's like, had a little link with that. She's like, oh, that actually sounds like my dream, and what these guys are coming with their prophecy kind of links into that. So she's buying into them more than somebody might otherwise do.
Yeah, she's connecting the dots, and so she realizes that maybe this prophecy that she's gotten from the Swords of Sigmar was going to lend some credibility to her argument, and so she's, for better or worse, using this prophecy to maybe strengthen her argument with the regent militant. So she takes them to his presence to sort of make their case and relay that information. Super nice dude, super chill. Maybe one of my favorite characters.
That also subverted my expectation in terms of you're like, okay, this guy's be pompous. Dude was like grandpa regent militant.
I was waiting for the turn, right? I always thought that he was gonna turn heel. He never really. Well, he did, but maybe not in the sense that I thought he was.
But one of the things that he is not here because he is this royalty. He's here because he was a hero. He saved this city. He saved the city a long time ago, but he was the savior, and that is how he got his position. So he is a merited.
Those are the rules. You save a city. You save a city. You got to rule it. That's how it goes.
But at this point, Helena does mention a couple times that he's kind of old and he's kind of getting up there, and he really can't be this hero anymore.
She feels like he's reliving his glory days, where he was part of this big campaign that took this area back from chaos in the retakings, right? Or whatever, save this city, and he places great stock in those things that were important to him in his youth. So he continues to try to put his resources, be they money or manpower or whatever, into further crusading, which factors in here, where he kind of dismisses some of these threats. He says, well, the bigger crusade is out there. We got it here. We can figure this out. This is chump change. We got this.
Furthermore, it's not we got this, it's you got this, City Watch, right? Here's the deal. I trust you.
If you have enough faith in Sigmar, you're going to make it happen. Yeah.
There's as they're getting led to this place, his headquarters, we're seeing statues, certainly of Stormcast, but where his big scene slaying a dragon is larger than life, almost like this. You get the impression that he's arrogant and pompous, and that he's kind of uplifting himself even over Sigmar. But when we get there, we see he is very kind. He is very willing to hear. He's not unreasonable. And the things he says, hey, he names the things that they've survived, and these weren't small things, demons, manifesting inside the city, and that big, a huge demon invasion inside the city. We've done that. This can't be worse than that. So I think we can handle it. The other thing, what was interesting about this guy is that he very much took to the position of warrior king and even priest.
Yeah.
Which was an interesting combination of roles that harkened back to Sigmar.
Sure. I think Andy Clark wrote him well. I believed him for what he was. That maybe he filled that spot that character should. He felt lived in.
Sure. I felt that I didn't hate him. I just was frustrated by him.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's exactly what you were supposed to.
He wasn't evil, just mistaken. Yeah. Right. Which best you could hope for, I guess. No, that's not true. He'd be right. But
did you see from his position and be like, I don't
Sure.
I can see how you.
Yeah, well, the thing you're describing is never something I've had to face before, and so like if I'm going to refer to the limited experience, not limited, he's faced a lot of stuff, but like I'm going to refer to my Rolodex of things I've already dealt with. Like I'm doing everything I can to deal with those threats that I've already dealt with.
Sure. I mean, this is what makes tragedy is like people making the wrong choices for the right reasons, right? So.
Also felt like management. Yeah, I'm dealing with it. You. I've got you doing this.
And he doesn't outright say it, but there was almost a sense of like, if you can't do it, I'm going to get someone who can. Like, I'll have someone who has more faith. Yeah. Paul wants to say something.
So one of the other things is that there is no Stormcast present in this city, and if there is a failing, it is that he doesn't think that they need help from anyone else, right? It is very much set up that they don't need Stormcast because they're good enough alone. So even from the very get-go, you kind of get the feeling that he's never going to believe what Hendrik is saying because he's not from the city. So he doesn't really trust him. Like, even when they walk into the palace, I know you're coming here to give me a prophecy, but you need to turn in your weapons, right? You're foreigners. You're not of us. And so this is an interesting thing, and it really humanizes the city itself. Instead of having these superheroes, again, we have these very normal day-to-day humans.
Sure, just like me.
So they fail. There is an interesting moment, if I may highlight Eleanor, who is the Ironweld... Eleonora, sorry, the Ironweld engineer. She happened to catch every word verbatim that Varlin had said and was able to recite these at the wall and then again here. She's constantly tinkering. I very much got a feeling that she may be on like an autistic spectrum.
Yeah.
But she's very well respected and treated, at least in the first part of this book, very well and held up for what she's very capable. And I really appreciated that element where like, and then also too, like Hendrik being a full-bodied person, but kind of incapable in a number of moments of doing what he needed to do.
Sure.
Because he's trying to plead with the Regent Militant, and even like he's intimidated. This person can stand eye to eye to him, has done as much or more than him. He doesn't rise to the occasion there. And Helena says as much a little bit later on, but like he's just again not capable, but this other person who you might expect to be less capable is able to kind of muster that ability to inspire at least a head turn or a consideration from him.
This comes up much later, but I don't know a better place to bring it up because it doesn't necessarily work with the plot. But you find out that Eleonora wasn't always considered capable, or she isn't always considered capable, and there's flashbacks to her past,
Sure.
And because of her, whether it's her gender or her mental state, I guess. She didn't always necessarily get the respect that maybe someone of her caliber or skill ought to have, which is a sort of fun juxtaposition. Also, she's been bitten by a spider somewhere at this point too.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to say I really respected that Andy Clark wrote that sort of character and it was treated so well.
Oh yeah.
I mean, even I appreciate the representation here. Like of the original 8, one of whom is dead at the prologue of the story. 3 of them are female. You got I had the same thought. I enjoyed that there were other representations in here.
So we've hit the point where they've talked to the Militant Regent, or Regent Militant, and they have been talked to and they've been dismissed, right? And I think it might be useful at this point to talk about what the different members of the Swords of Sigmar have a reaction to, right? So to start with, Boric is just like, we're done, right? We did what we said. We honored Varlin's memory. We're leaving now, right? Everybody says that we're leaving. But Hendrik says, we're not done yet, right? Eleonora...
Well, they can't. They have an obstacle where they aren't allowed to leave because the doors are shut.
Yeah.
But despite that, Boric is like...
We can figure this out.
Eleonora...
He's like, man, don't you know we can fly? Like,
Eleonora wants to find a workshop. This is kind of an enduring theme, is that she wants to find a place to tinker with things. She wants to find a workshop to be able to work on things. And so we still continue that tension that we had from earlier on in the book, but it's a little bit more pronounced now, right? They've finished their initial mission. and now they're stuck in a position of not being able to leave, but many of them don't want to leave anyway.
And instead of resolving that tension, we smash cut over to Chrysanthena, a weird cult leader.
Yep.
Yeah.
Another really cool part, and again, taking a step aside to point out a little corner of this city and a corner of the realm and a corner of like religion that didn't need to take place, but I was very glad that it did. And I don't know, but it felt like I almost felt like I was being like deceived into thinking like this was perhaps part of the threat, even though it was kind of like, anyway.
The basis of her cult is that, and this is cool, I've never really thought about this in these terms, but there's the realm of heavens. That is heaven. That's what's pure. We're all tainted and foul to be down here. But it's an actual place we can go to, and there's a realm gate right there, and we just have to be faithful enough to go and do it. And so it's almost like a doomsday cult, right? Like, hey, there's going to be this time, and we're going to get raptured, or whatever. Like we're going to go back to the heavens where things are pure, and we're going to be rewarded for our faith that we get to go.
You always hear about like the people leaving Azir. What would you call that? Like the pioneers leaving Azir, trying to resettle the mortal realms. Imagine being a resident of Axia or whatever, seeing these people leaving heaven to come like settle your. What are you doing, you maniacs? Like, could I take your spot? Like, I want to go kick it back in heaven. Yeah. So it is a weird juxtaposition, and like you said, like it's something like I hadn't thought of it either. The idea that like heaven is a place on earth, no, anybody?
Yeah.
Okay. And there's no reason why you wouldn't want to go there. Like, to be constantly under Sigmar's protection.
And this is a thing that I'm used to in Black Library. It being, if you are a devotee of Sigmar, then you're on the right path, right? You're on the right track. This is the first time that I've seen where it was like somebody is like, hey, Sigmar, you're the best, but maybe they're steering people the wrong way.
Sure. Like warping that devotion to Sigmar.
Yeah. And the point of the cult is that everything but the realm of heavens is purgatory, right? You have to prove yourself worthy of returning to
Joke's
the realm
on them.
of heavens.
Just walk through a realm gate and you're fine.
Yeah.
Well, to me, this felt like it could be an angle or an extreme even of the devoted of Sigmar. I mean, with the flagellation and asceticism, and taking it to an extreme. We have what was her name?
It's hard to pronounce. Chrysanthena.
She's the torchbearer, and that she is the leader, and she does a lot to psychologically abuse her followers and to kind of herd them into the mentality.
Don't keep your kids out of that acid water. If they have faith enough, they won't get burned.
Yep.
But what was also, that was an interesting mirror to what the regent militant talked about too, and being like, hey, I mean, if you don't think we can hack it, it's because you don't have faith, not because we don't have enough swords or we don't have enough of whatever. So, they were dank warehouse in a abandoned part of town. So the city's big enough to have an abandoned part.
Sure.
So things like that just added a lot of flavor.
Yeah, they had a little mass there. And then we cut back to the Swords of Sigmar, and because they're sort of locked in the city, they decide to be useful, I guess, in
Let's
a sense.
earn some coin.
Right. So they are able to link up with the captain of the watch again, Helena, and say, hey, look, we'll do some, I don't want to say dirty work, we'll do some footwork for you. If you'd be willing to pay for us, like,
Dirty deeds done dirt cheap.
Yeah, exactly. And so they come to an agreement. Yeah, so she's like, all right, well, I got these things that need to be looked into. I'll sick you guys on them, so go at it. And they do. And so they sort of split up, join in the sort of little sub parties, and they go take a look at some mysteries.
I know we've been talking about these different characters, but the captain basically asks, well, what are you guys any good at? And Hendrik does a rapid fire of the crew, if you want me to read that.
Yeah, I would love it.
Romilla Aiden, Sigmarite warrior priest and military veteran. Eleonora Van Guest, brilliant, outcast, and if there's anything she can't blow up, it's not worth the black powder. Aelin Melathril, wanderer, waywatcher. If you mean us any harm at any point, she will know, and you will die with an arrow in your skull. Bardaman Kotran, death wizard, does very much what it says on the keg. Olt Shev, scout, another veteran from Azerheim's glorious armies, just like me. And the surly arse at the bar is Boric Jorgensen, whom my brother Varlin hired as a bodyguard a couple years back, and who I'm sure you will have noticed carries a very large gun. There, you know us. Now, hire us, and then we can get some damn sleep.
This feels like that part where like they get their freeze frame and then like the subtitle or whatever. Yeah.
That was like an AOS A team, right?
What is it?
If
The,
you can
the
find us.
Expendables?
Explosives
Scott?
expert. Yeah,
I was thinking of Inglorious Bastards where they'd freeze it underneath. Yeah.
I loved it.
Couple equally good calls there.
I've seen those movies, or like Ocean's 11.
I've
I feel
seen
like
a movie.
each
Ocean-
person like
Sure.
Ocean's
yeah.
11.
That's
Yeah,
better. That is the one.
Heist
That's the
movie.
one we both should have said.
Paul, what you got?
I said AOS A team.
Well, I guess we.
AOS team.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
team-
I was gonna do that, but I was like, I don't know if that would translate.
a team of Sigmar. Anyways, so they're hired, and let's like investigate a mystery. So they
Ruh-roh reg.
Yeah, if they just would have had a Griffhound, they could have been Scooby Doo.
so us one group of them, I don't even know who,
Scrooby.
they take a peek at a tunnel
See
that
who
was
the
dug.
arch militant really was.
I'm sorry, I know you're trying to talk about the plot. We're still making jokes over here.
Wait a second, it was Scooby all along. No,
I would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for you dying kids.
guys, there's a tunnel in the basement, and we're not going to be able to investigate it if we don't spend time taking a look at it. And so it was in the basement of the Alchemist Guild, which I guess is pertinent because they have a whole bunch of bottles. And did we learn at one point Gloomspite don't make their own bottles?
No, they steal them all.
So-
So like little test tubes.
Part of those reports previously were like weird things get stolen, and some of the things getting stolen are just glass bottles.
Yeah,
and
exactly. And then there's also apparently this grain that was stored in a warehouse went real bad. Like not just regular bad, but real bad.
Gnarly
Like,
bad,
You ever
yeah.
see like that corn blight or whatever? Like, I just get the heebie-jeebies thinking about it. But like corn gets like weird mushrooms. Anyways, that's what
You
happened.
are
to this
so
grain.
Midwestern right now.
I grew up in Chicago. Like I didn't see a cornfield. That's not true.
No, it was the heebie-jeebies, I think.
Both the Hebes
No,
and
no,
the
it was
Jeebs.
like, oh man, corn blight, yuck, oh.
I don't know. You,
Andy
like
Clark,
science,
We know
you
corn.
hit his button.
science
He was like,
textbooks.
oh no, it's like corn blight.
I'm from Illinois. All right. But anyways, it's real gross. So the grain goes real bad. And they suspect that like there's like a connection to like the sewers. So they're wondering if like there was a connection to the sewers that made the grain go bad. So each of the groups explore these crime scenes, but whilst like one group's in the sewers and one group is exploring the tunnels underneath this Alchemist Guild, there's a huge like tremor, like earthquake.
Yeah,
and
but
they're-
like almost a reverse earthquake, right? Like
Skyquake.
well, like gravity goes all
yeah,
wacky,
yeah.
right? Yeah. Like so there's a big tremor and then in the one like the only person who is able to like kind of hang in there is the overlord who's in his heavy armor,
Jorgensen, yeah.
Jorgensen,
Yeah.
and he's like on his tiptoes because he's just barely held down, and he's like running with them in his arms. Like it took me a while to figure out what was going on, but it was cool.
Yeah, agreed. You'd almost wish he would have been on something metal so he could have flipped on his boots, right? Because
Sure.
don't they have
Yeah.
like magnet boots?
Yeah. This guy knows his lore.
You darn right. I don't know if you know this, but I do like a lore podcast for AOS.
Really? What's it called?
Oh, you're giving me.
Never heard of it.
I don't know if you guys saw today, but like I had my feelings hurt
I
today.
did. we had one of our biggest voices in the Discord. Like he's been in there for months. And
Day one,
He
yeah.
was like, "So hold on, you guys do a podcast? how do I listen to it?"
Hard not to take that personal.
Full disclosure, I knew he didn't listen to our podcast.
Wait a minute.
But I was like, it's
So
okay.
like we're getting our Patreon's getting randomly found.
Yeah.
And
People are just kicking it in the
just
Discord.
like giving us money.
Yeah. Yep.
We don't even know it.
throw up enough gnawholes.
themortalrealms.com/discord.
Put a novel.
Are we the bad guys in this story?
Quite possibly.
Kidnapping people in
Are we
bar.
talking about a story still? I didn't remember that.
I mean, I stepped away. Like I stood up and walked away from the computer when I read that.
So basically, in two different places, we have these little parties that are exploring, and
Splitting
they
the
both
party.
have this issue with the pressure wave, and then gravity having an issue. And Eleonora is in a workshop, and she also
Oh, that's right.
suffers problems
separate,
from
yeah.
this
Yeah.
this lack of gravity, and she takes some further injury to herself.
Yeah.
In addition to the spider bite that's already causing some lingering issues.
Yeah, like shrapnel through her back. I couldn't figure out if this is a gravity thing or a magnetism thing or something like that, or maybe both. But like basically the laws of physics, such as they are in the mortal realms, all get thrown off by something. So something big's coming.
I got the feeling, she might have explained it later, but that the laws of physics changed, and so some of the stuff blew up, right? It was stable, but because the laws changed, stuff started messing up.
Kind of like when the Necroquake hit.
A little bit.
Yep. So we're sort of left on a split, just a real quick cliffhanger, like who survives this. Surprise! Everybody survives it. But they end up reconvening back at the the inn that they're all staying at, sort of nursing their wounds. But they are retrieved there because it turns out something's going down at the city gates, the city walls, and they're needed to I don't know, help diffuse the situation.
A million grots and squigs waiting to take the city, right?
Wrong,
No, we haven't seen a single grot, a single squig. We have seen no grots,
Scrubs
no
reference, I
squigs.
get that one.
You're wrong.
You're wrong. Oh god, I love that show. Man, I have them all on DVD, and I don't own anything on DVD.
Ironically, this entire book makes you want to scrub the whole time.
Boo.
So they're waiting at the gates
do this on my own.
because
Because that cult that we were talking about before,
and the militant regent is also there.
that
Eventually.
sounds right. Yeah, I guess. But the cult is skipping town. They are outie
Yeah.
for shouty.
They're
So
demanding.
there's a big
exit.
standoff, right? Like the militia militant is like, no, you're not leaving. They say, yes, we are. They are threatening to blow up the gate.
Yep.
Like, oh man, that's
The
going to suck for the
torchbearer.
lake. So there's this big standoff, and then the arch regent
militant.
shows up, and he's like, let him go. You
Sure.
know, like, sure. If they basically, he's saying this is a test of faith. Like it's there's a religious conflict here, but he says if they want to go, fine, let them go.
Yeah. And they agree this is a test of faith, right? It's almost in the sense they're on the same side. They're like, yeah, no, that is, and we're gonna
Like,
pass.
he's like,
That's what I said. No, that's what I said. No.
faith,
No,
faith
I'm right.
is my
No,
thing.
I'm right. Exactly.
And so they head out, and this is probably one of my favorite, like both spookiest parts of the book and one of my favorite parts of the book. And so they
This is one of your favorite parts of the book.
It is. It actually. I mean, just
Weirdo.
from an interesting. It's just an interesting setup. So they set out this group. So this cult of, I don't even know, like 50, 100 people maybe, or maybe that's higher.
I felt like it was 300 or 400.
Yeah,
but I'm not
she-
sure.
it was
Oh,
a
they
substantial
mentioned that.
amount.
Okay, gotcha. So they set out from the city, and they're making their plan is to make their way to Azir, right? So
Yeah.
just outside the city limits,
And-
outside the gates.
And they're going without scald shields, and because the thing she's like, if you have faith enough, you won't get burned. And
Sure.
she's going like, this kind of burns. She's like, it's fine. That's because my flesh is corrupt.
Well, and it's like,
yeah,
I love whenever like any sort of, I'm gonna say cult or religious aspect where like, no, this body is just a husk, and like
Yeah.
what's inside is really what matters. Like, who cares? It's your flesh robot that you're walking down the street, and
Flesh robot.
it is what it is. So they're doing, but like
We're starting this cult later, right?
Darn right. I started a long time ago. Do you think why I'm on this podcast, right? Just to rope you guys in. Almost within the site of the city, like this fog rolls in, and they're walking down the road trying to get out of town, and as you might expect, people are getting plucked left and right, and there's screams off in the distance, and
Yeah.
and they're losing people, and
Yeah.
it's super like it's a quintessential like horror like
sure.
trope or scene. Also, like it happens in Jurassic Park when the velociraptors get him like in the grass. Anyways,
the monster off
Our
screen.
tangents
Yeah.
are
But in this,
so
there's
crazy.
like some glimpses where you're like, oh, that might be a grot, like where they're like maybe it's something small and hood or something
beady
like
red
that.
eyes or like glinting blades in the fog.
Yeah.
Excuse me, movie reference tangents have been a staple of the More Realms podcast since day one.
Since
just had a lot.
inception. Yeah.
And I'm just waiting to
Shout out
Wait,
to
do we have to have the
Mouse.
whole thing go backwards now?
So at any rate, this lantern bearer who's the leader, so she ends up I think getting to be one of the last people standing, but she's still
Yeah.
marching onwards.
Well,
face
she has this thing where it's like, oh man, like I'm getting kind of scared. Oh, but I shouldn't because if I lose faith, then then how the heck could any of my followers keep faith? So I'm going to try, but oh no, but now I'm thinking about, but how do I stop thinking about it?
to that end, what followers, right? Like at this point, she's all by herself, and then she gets dragged down and get off screen. There's a scream in the distance.
So
And
this
by
whole crowd
Oryx.
is gone, but it's all off screen.
Oh, and this whole time leading up to this it's been this downpour, acidic rain downpour that they haven't been able to shake. Shortly after this procession of cultists or whatever that have gone out, the next morning it's sunny out, and everyone's like, "Oh man, I guess the arch regent militant was
Regent
sorry.
Militant.
Regent
Militant is
Is it
not
militant
a-
regent?
Archbishop Cardinal Regent Militant. Yeah.
I guess that Regent Militant was right, and he's like, yeah, so this is a sign that this Sigmar was looking for us to cast out these unbelievers, not even unbelievers, but like overbelievers,
Two believers.
overachiever believers.
Overachiever believers.
Oh no,
was
that's
great.
my childhood.
Deep thoughts.
Which, I mean,
But
we've met Sigmar a couple times now. Does that read for Sigmar at all? Like, does that track? Is there like his perspective on like
No.
his followers or believers? Like, I'm not to put him on too high a pedestal, but he seems like a pretty cool dude. Like, generally, like, would he want a whole cult of people to be just eliminated? He wouldn't want that.
No, but it's rough. But I mean, here is one of his foremost heroes, and he's stretched so thin that even one of his foremost heroes is still kind of a little bit off base with his interpretation of this, and that's a cool aspect,
Yeah.
right? So
Especially considering like Sigmar could just bop in real quick and be like, "Hey, no, that's not cool. I don't like that."
But and I would say over millennium or multiple millennium, Sigmar's probably seen mortals worship him in a lot of different ways.
Sure.
And he's got no control of
Yeah.
that. He's not. He
Yeah.
can't appear to all of it.
well,
You-
yeah, I mean,
being a god is hard, and trust me, I know.
but I mean, this is an example, and this is already well established. But he's not omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent. Like he doesn't have. He has limited resources, and he expends those.
And he gets
in the way
distracted
he
by
chooses.
shiny things.
Yeah. But hey, sun's out. These
Guns out.
Guns out.
yeah, cool.
So cool.
A couple of Borgs over here.
Sun's out, and it is time to celebrate, right? Like, so even the poor quarters are celebrating, and the Regent Militant says, I'm going to throw a big party.
Well, but
What a fun guy.
Poo hurts.
All right, let's cut to the celebration. All
Yeah.
right, so the party's invited. Apparently, everybody's invited because it's a big old town celebration. The Regent Militant is hosting it at his palace. The right word?
Yeah,
Is-
I mean, it's the
Oh,
nobility,
yes.
right? Like
Okay, yeah.
the well-to-do are going here.
sure.
Yeah, and
So we'd be invited, right?
yeah, absolutely. Helena is not on board with this, so she hires the Swords of Sigmar to be bodyguards for the militant regent. The regent militant?
Either way,
Either way.
it depends on like what he's doing that day.
Because she still thinks that there's something going on, and nobody really
Right,
is
some
safe
of
at this
the
point.
disappearances are still occurring.
Rightfully so. So they roll up. The nobility's celebrating. They're feasting. It's your classic noble celebration. There's probably champagne or whatever the equivalent is.
They have a cool social encounter of trying to get in, and they've got all their weapons, and the guards are like, no, that's not happening. They say, and they have to bluff their way in, say, I mean, basically, we're here
You
because...
gotta do your deception check.
Yeah. We think there may be some people who are actually sympathetic to all those cultists who got sent out. So, I mean, if you want to be on your head when something happens, then that's cool. Like, we'll just take off. And so.
A classic RPG deception
Yeah,
check,
totally.
actually.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Does Hendrik perform this check, or does he rely on anybody else?
I don't know, and
I can't remember. But they do kind of lay it down. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't remember.
I'm just looking for him failing again.
What do you have against Hendrik? Hendrik's
About
all
to
right.
happen.
Well, I think
Yeah,
what I mean.
just wait for it.
Again, I think Andy Clark is writing a leader who's super fallible.
Yeah.
You know,
Wait for it.
Wait, so are you at this point yet? Or you're
No, I
you're
think
okay?
we've progressed
You're past
beyond
it?
his.
This is
This
fun.
is-
So now I want to start talking to
you're
you.
all diverting expectations from here on out.
Yeah, all right. You're. Get ready for some bangers because here they go.
I'm ready.
All right. So
And mash.
eventually,
are not ready.
at some point, the Regent Militant gets up to give a speech. Right. So he stands up at this big podium up above everybody, takes a swig of something, and
Some
he's
special wine that
some-
just gets brought out especially for him.
yep, some fancy wine, and he's
Schmancy.
about to give a speech, or he gives some sort of speech.
Yeah.
I don't know what
Toast.
it is. Yeah. Bada bing, bada boom. Something happens, and he starts to like convulse and double over, and turns into a giant mushroom.
Well, he starts coughing out spores.
Well,
Yeah.
that's what it is. Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
I thought we were gonna make Eric guess what happened.
Oh no, I didn't.
Oh,
did we say
he
we were
turns
gonna-
into a giant
We're gonna
mushroom.
make Eric guess something coming up quick here.
Yeah.
But,
All right.
Oh well, then someone else lead this. All right, I'm done. I'm out. Tapping out.
all right, so he coughs up this purple cloud of spores. It comes down and it hits some of the festival, not the feast goers, right?
Yeah.
And then they start changing. They grow big tusks. They get crazed. They get all it's clearly mutating them, and they start basically zombie moding, and then
But like 28 days later, zombies not like Dawn of the Dead.
I would argue
Last
they're
of Us.
flesh eater courting.
That's
contest. Yeah.
Well, it's a sickness, craziness that's transporting from a main figure to the rest of the people, and then they start to attack and eat
if
other
I don't
people.
think the prologue he turned into a chaos spawn, what makes you think I'm going to think this dude is flesh eater?
He's like, no, this is my mushroom moment.
yeah.
No, I mean, I
Everyone's
get
a-
what
everyone's
Paul's
a
saying
mushroom.
in terms of that Flesh Eater Court is a mental or a blood transmuted mental state that
Yep.
causes normal people to
There's yeah.
whatever. I get that connection's
There's
interesting.
There's
Yeah.
a clear physical component to this,
Yep.
though. Yep.
Yep.
So all of a sudden, and they're vomiting up this purple slime, which gets on other people and then turns them, and so it's just this like exponential propagation through and just total chaos. And
Destruction, though, probably.
fair. And
At
the
cellular
Swords of
level.
Sigmar who are there, like, whoa, snap! Like we were supposed to be here to protect the Regent Militant, and he just doubled over. He's lying on the ground there, and we probably should go help him.
So far the only thing that they've successfully done is grab a crown that turned their leader into a nuts bag.
that was in the prologue. That hasn't
They
happened yet.
they delivered a warning.
Okay,
They performed.
That was ignored.
They busted up some
Delivered it.
smuggling rings. That
Yeah.
was off screen. So, but and they have a job to like they already have a
this
job
guy.
that they completed. But they've put that on hold in order to do this one. Anyway, I'm in defense of the Swords of Sigmar.
Things
Anyway.
are going so well. We got room to botch things.
Yeah. So like they're torn. Like all we got is sidearms. Like we've got what we were able to hide on our person. We don't have our big weapons. We need that to be able to get through this because it is chaos. Like it is the whatever these fungus zombies are just tearing things down. So there's some people say we got to go get the weapons. Other people say we don't have time to do that. We got to go save this guy who is our job. And so they split the party again, right?
Kind of a theme. Like, they do
yep.
that a lot.
Yep.
Eric,
Yeah.
you haven't read this far.
No, I haven't.
What's your impression? Do you think any of these members of Swords of Sigmar are due for the chopping block?
Ooh. All right.
We keep
So-
a tally.
So are they going back for their weapons in order to like jump back in?
Some of them are
Some
going
are.
back for
Yep,
the
there's a group
weapons,
that's going back for
and
their
there's a
weapons.
group that's going to go save.
Magic user, the wizard.
He's going back for the weapons.
So, but why does he need weapons?
He's part of the
wizard.
posse that can.
Okay, so then
He's laying down cover fire.
Okay, so then somebody is sticking to stay in the fray. Is what you're telling me, and who is it that stays in the fray and maybe gets?
Who do you
Yeah.
think? That's the question, maybe.
I think Bork is the first to go.
So Romilla and Hendrik fight their way to the front, and they're smashing zombies because Romilla's got like a little.
Like a
what was
toy
assumed to
hammer.
be like a decorative hammer,
Yeah.
but it's like JK, it's for real. And
Like a judge's gavel, but like, oh no, this really hurts.
yeah,
Ow.
and Hendrik just rips a table leg off, and he's just using that as a two-handed club.
Which is legit. It's fun
It's
to read.
cool.
Yeah.
Hey.
It's good. And they get and they're
Melee.
pushing up and they're almost there and they get there and the Regent Militant they're like, we're too late. This guy is like a shroom on the ground. Like he is almost
it,
clearly
told you.
dead.
Yeah,
all
turning into
bloated.
a mushroom.
And as they're arriving, Hendrik gets jumped and vomited on, and Hendrik starts turning into a fungus zombie.
No, I mean, okay.
Let me pretend.
I was
real
only
quick.
25% invested in the story
Let
anyway.
me pretend. Oh no. Well,
What?
I mean, I was okay. So to this point, I'm looking for a redemption arc of some sort. Mm-hmm. No, so you're
No.
telling me he?
So here's the thing.
Biffs it.
So he Romilla has to put him down, basically.
Okay.
She has to put her friend down. She hits him. There's like the first of many headbutts.
clubs them or something.
Ends up like smashing him, killing him, put him out of his misery, basically. He's able to have some last words. He's like,
Oh, I don't know what they are.
Varlin, I'm sorry.
Oh.
I think is what it was because he feels like he's failed his brother.
yeah.
But for redemption, I mean, this guy went down like trying to do his job, trying to help this city. So
Yeah, I would agree. His like kind of he did step up and try and become a leader to the group.
Yeah.
They're in the
And he did.
in the situation they're in. Yeah, they did what
He put himself in the most risky position of this. Is like we're
cool.
going to try and do this job. But this was a shock to me.
Yeah,
Like
me too.
I feel like I know that the arc that Black Library books take, and it is here's the group, and they're going to get cut up, and I have 100 cuts and all that sort of thing. And the character that I thought was going to be our main character because he's the leader, and I thought he was going to have the arc of like, I'm the reluctant leader. Actually, it turns out I'm good at being a leader. He dies, and we're less than halfway through the book.
Yeah.
And this puts you on notice, like, oh man, like all of a sudden the stakes were up, and we talked about this before, like what are the stakes, right? And we talked about that, and so all of a sudden I was like, okay, and again, subverting expectations. It was not my expectation that one of what I assumed was going to be the main characters would die, and so that meant any of
Everything's on the table.
the dangerous positions that any of the characters were in. All of a sudden, I was like, I don't know if they're going to get through this, and I think this is the point where it became almost a page turner for me. So,
See, this is the point.
boo,
This is not
boo.
the book for me. I was so happy when Varlin died. I was like,
Not
thank
Varlin. What?
goodness, Henrik. I was so happy because I was so tired of him being maudlin and mourning his brother the whole book.
You
Wow.
heartless.
Paul, you have the things you have zero empathy so far. This is appalling. Good lord.
Appalling.
Yeah.
Yes, unintentional
Oh
pun
man,
for the
that's
win.
great.
Back to that.
So I echo your point that it
That's
proves
fair.
that no one's safe. So that landed heavily. But also, like if this was a horror movie, right? Like this is when the people start dying, and like
Yep.
you've got all these characters that like you have a little bit of interest or connection to, and then you're gonna start losing them.
Yeah.
And spoiler for the rest of this, like this is where it starts basically.
Well, and to kind of illustrate the point, it's just this book talked a lot about the emotions of the characters, right? And that doesn't really
And you thought
necessarily
that was
excite me in
gross.
fantasy.
What?
It doesn't really excite me in fantasy novels.
This
I
is
would
this
much
is
rather-
where we depart
Yep,
because
absolutely.
yeah, I feel like the heart of any story is whether you can make a human connection. World build all you want. I'll think it's cool, but I won't connect to your story because there's no one I can connect to, right?
Yep.
Like there has to be someone that I can identify with or at least appreciate. It may. I mean, obviously, it's not going to be a life that I know, right? Because they're in this crazy magical world. But I want to know that the characters have these feelings, have these emotions, have these reactions that some part of it I can identify with, and then I'm so much more invested in the story.
Yeah.
And I mean, I remember this with other things where, there's some movie we'd be talking about, and you'd be like, oh gosh, I wish there was more world building. And I was like, oh man, like I liked it because the character arc existed. So I think you and I exist on different spectrums. You want more world building. I want more character arc, character development.
I want more world building, and I want a little bit more action, and I also want
More action.
I want some escape. And that was a thing that to me
Yeah.
was holding it back, is every time I was like, okay, now we're getting to the action, there were several paragraphs about the emotions of the character, and I was like,
Man.
why couldn't we have just
we
moved
are-
on to
we are
the
in
action?
different spots.
Well, and,
robot
and
man.
it could be a case of like where the emotion is set, like where that paragraph is. Whereas, like, don't give me that right then. That I mean, I could see there being a literary having to separate the fact that, like, yeah, he talked about this, but that was one of those things that was holding him back from being what he was supposed to be, and I think that him being unlikable is intentional.
Yeah.
And that frustration,
Well,
like
yeah.
being able to say that I'm frustrated with him, shouldn't it be necessary? Or I don't want to say it in a way that's condemning how you're feeling, but can be a way that you're enjoying it's how the story is constructed because that person is unlikable.
Well, and
like because I was very much, I was saying that I was looking for an arc, but I was okay with him being not the hero,
Sure.
and that he didn't fit the archetype because
Yeah.
we had a lot of archetypes not fit.
And I mean, you talked about an example of a show you're watching where there are a lot of unlikable characters. I felt like a lot of these characters were likable, and that's what made it more difficult. So I just want to make sure that we're not making that.
Yeah.
And Paul, I remember a previous conversation we had where I think we were talking about it might have been movies where or movies or TV shows, and I was making a recommendation, and you said, "Oh, is that drama?" I said, "Yeah." And you're like, "Oh, I'm not interested." You're like, because your goal with your entertainment, with your free time, is that you want escape.
Yep.
Which
I want imagination. I want creativity.
sure, and I like those things too. But I think there's a place for drama. I think there's a place for this sort of thing.
Yeah, and there were other things about this story that were frustrating to me, like the fact that we've made it to this point in the story, we haven't seen a single grot. Right, that was frustrating the heck out of me. Right, and then we finally see something that is a destruction monster, and it's a flesh eater court zombie thing.
Get flesh eater cord. That's on you. That's on you.
Don't you put that juju
It's
on
not
while
all right.
we're reading.
Let me put it this way: it's not in the battle tome, right? Absolutely not in the battle tome, and it's a cool idea.
Yeah.
But this becomes, to me, the scariest thing in the book. Is this this contagion that turns people into these nasty humans?
Sure.
Man,
I want the grots to be the scariest thing in the book, right? I don't want something that you made up to be the scariest thing in the book. And that really frustrated me.
But isn't that the way it always goes? That mankind is always the real villain.
So I mean,
That's fair. That's a
Aaron
fair
kind.
point.
what you're saying is that it just didn't you. When you're going to an AOS book, you want it to tie to the models and things that
Yep.
you know that you can put on the table and play.
Yes.
So it's a part of that escape.
And also that none of the characters were ones that I wanted to relate to, right? They were likable, but I didn't want to put myself in the shoes of any of these characters.
There was like 8
That's
awesome
because
people.
You're a
Like
terrible
what?
person.
So
Paul.
no, here I'll have one other anecdote that
Well,
has nothing
but-
to do with this book.
Perfect.
Is that I was
One
talking.
more.
I was talking to somebody at work, and he's got a 7-year-old who's probably like the most profound 7-year-old I've ever met. Like, will like comment on the world in such a way that you think that this kid is like 80 years old and been through like some stuff.
Like all 7.
And I was talking to him about movies, and this kid will watch all the Star Wars trilogies. 7 years old, and he'll sit through violence. He'll sit like not gruesome, but like none of that bothers him. The thing he doesn't like, sadness. Like he won't watch a movie that's sad because you can have all the fantasy in the world, but when you're wanting to watch something cool, the sadness is real, right? And is not something that you want to maybe always have
Yep.
in your epic.
But
That's
I
relatively fair.
I only draw that to be an apologist for Paul and what he's saying is that what I want.
an apologist.
How did we find out that? How do we not know his name fits into so many? But I mean, just in the sense of like sadness or like that serious side of things can be a thing that takes people out of kind of the space that they want to be in.
Sure. And my argument is that it's just part of the human condition.
Yep,
and if you want to
absolutely.
connect to it, like
Absolutely fair.
Yeah.
Yep. Like I said, it wasn't like that's why I said from the beginning, this is not my genre. This is not my type of book.
For sure.
Although I will say, your Scourge hero murdering the hell out of people in our
But he
campaign.
didn't feel bad about it.
No,
he
that's
wasn't
what-
saying, "Oh, I'm a terrible person because I'm having to do
no.
these things."
yeah, and that's why I hated him.
and because he was like, "This is what I'm meant to do." Like I'm okay with that.
He's a sociopath.
Yeah, but he was intended to be a sociopath,
But-
right? He's not a reluctant sociopath. He's not sad about seeing a sociopath.
but-
That's the definition of a sociopath. If a sociopath was reluctant about being a sociopath, they wouldn't be a sociopath.
Yeah, so he's happy, right?
God.
So after Hendrik drops, the party is driven from this pandemonium or whatever. And what do they see out in the sky? Our best friend, our dearest friend.
Sigmar.
No, what? No, that's not my friend.
All right, you got your one guess.
No friend of mine. Is the bad moon.
It's the bad moon.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's just leering down
Yeah.
on people.
And the reason they're driven from the palace is because this contagion is spreading.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as this contagion is spreading, the Regent Militant is also turning into this giant fleshy mushroom that starts to fill the palace.
Why did you have to say
and-
the word fleshy? That makes it so much worse.
Actually, I say moist too.
fleshy.
What I want to know is who was the first person to see the bad moon rising?
I'm not sure.
I think it was a 3-dog night, so one of those.
Aelin, maybe?
Moistalica, moisture of puppets.
You guys cut it out. It's not cool anymore.
So they have the remainder of the Swords of Sigmar come running out of the front doors, and the front gates nobody knows what's going on yet. The bad moon has risen, but it hasn't started to like assert itself yet. So they have this like troop of acrobats over to the left that is doing their thing, and like these other just normal people acting normal, and they're starting to be affected by the bad moon, but they haven't realized that like this is basically the apocalypse, right? And the bad moon starts to have these symptoms on every piece of uncovered skin, and people start growing mushrooms through their pores.
Yeah, this is horrific. Like our main characters like look down and mushrooms are literally growing out of the skin of their arms.
Well, our new main character.
No, I mean main characters. I said
we've gotten their
Sorry.
perspectives
Our
before.
party.
Yeah. And so what, like, they immediately realize that, like, I don't know what draws their attention to it, but they get the sense that it's the moon that's causing this. And so that what they have to do is real quick, like, cover themselves up, or they need to get in, the shade of buildings or what have you. And they're able to reconvene with their party and with the captain as well. And they have to sort of develop a plan of attack. Like, what are we going to do about this? So they realize that something's not right with that Regent Militant, and they need to solve this problem. And Eleonora, the resourceful gal that she is, was like,
Blows
all
it
right,
up.
yeah, let's just straight up blow it up. I got these bombs, and they decide that that's the right course of
1,
action.
2, 3 barrels of powder. I got enough.
Yeah, perfect.
There was like a wagon that they observed earlier. It was a
Of course, there was.
Chekhov's gun. Is that what it is?
Are we waiting for Guffman?
Chekhov's gun is something that if there's a gun on the wall in the first act, you have to fire it by the third.
Yeah, no, it's not the third act, but they saw this and they did end up
I
using
see.
it.
Okay, so then yeah,
It's
okay.
foreshadowing.
And then she figures out she can ignite this. So this literally the mushroom being that was the Regent Militant is growing so big that it is like exploding the palace. It's palace sized at this point. But she managed to set it on fire with her cool plan, which is to get these bombs and spark off this this fuel source and burn it down.
And so they do that. Mission accomplished.
Okay, I do that.
Roasted portobello.
So I do that. Yeah. And problem solved. But it's around this time that now is when the grots start spilling from like tunnels all around the city, and it's like they sort of arrive.
Paul,
in
you
force.
made me feel like there's no grots.
And
Well-
Tragoths, am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Taragoths.
Rogoths.
Well,
T-Rogoths?
now there are
T-Rogoths.
grots.
Yeah.
Now, there's not a ton. I mean, there are a large number.
a ton.
But as far as word count, there's not
There's
a
not
lot.
2,000 pounds of them, okay?
Well, there's not a lot of word count given to them,
Okay.
right?
Fair.
It's like,
Fair.
here is a...
Not a character or a specific one called out.
Well,
Later.
Skagrot is called out later, but it's basically like, here is a unit of Moon Clan Grots. Oh, look, they have nets. They have spears. They have whatever. Moving on. Here
That's
are-
in the battle tone, Paul.
Yeah, it is in the battle tone. So I was happy, but then it was like, this is what the unit is. And then that was it. There wasn't any like, look at the cool things they're doing. It was like, here's a unit. And that was it. I like the Grots. What can I say? Like,
Yeah.
they're my heroes.
Well,
We need to
I
record
think I
this.
think you needed a very specific thing out of this.
I did. I wanted,
Yeah.
like I said, I wanted Skarsnik 2.0. And I was like, okay, finally, we're getting it. And it was, no, we're still focused on the main characters.
Skarsnik is a moon of the bad moon now.
Yeah.
Right now, he's a
Yeah, but
celestial body.
Skagrot, if they would have focused on Skagrot and his lunatic asylum, like, they could have done the, I don't know. He could have done the same deal.
He does some
Sequel.
nonsense later.
Anywho, what's happening?
All right, so after they blow the big mushroom dude up, so they reconvene, as they fight their way back together through the grots. I think they, wade through their waves of grots in the alleys of the city, and they find themselves holed up in
A safe house. It's a ruin that is beneath it is this fortified watchtower, basically. These safe houses that they've located throughout the city.
I don't know
Underground
they're at
watchtower.
safe house quite yet, in that they rendezvous at a square first, where they're fighting a horde of like squig riders, which is what I was confused about.
Grots.
Yeah, and so they're doing a number on them, and they're surviving because grots are a bunch of chumps on the battlefield, but they do have some tricks up their sleeves, and by that I mean the Bad Moon delivers a series of meteor showers on top of them, lunestone showers.
Yep.
And sort of as the rocks are rocketing down on top of our party, like the scene cuts
Dropping
cuts
mortal
away.
wounds all up in that piece.
Straight out of the battle tome. This is right in their allegiance ability.
Exactly, mortal wounds, because we find out later that in this meteor shower, not even on screen, which is kind of a bummer, our dude, Old Chef.
Yep.
Yeah.
Off-screen death. He was the coolest character,
All right,
in my opinion.
he was my dude, yeah.
And just like an off-screen death, I was like, oh.
He was the scout?
He was the
he was
scout.
the actually.
Well,
Now, so do we learn? I was expecting, you mentioned to Paul earlier that he'd had like markings on his body, etc. Did I get a sense that he was a chaos follower?
I thought that was possible. He definitely was worried about city dwellers seeing him. It was never clearly referenced, but his tattoos were like tied to these other gods. Like he didn't place Sigmar above all. Sigmar is just one of many gods.
Okay.
But definitely reading it, like the first time I saw that, I was like, oh, maybe this dude is like a Dark Oath. Maybe he's like a Dark Oath dude or something like that. But finds his employ in here because we see that in stuff like, Silver Tower or whatever. There's the opportunity to bring Chaos aligned things in there and figure out how they integrate with. So he was. I wanted to know a lot more about him.
Yeah.
Too bad he's dead.
Yeah.
Super dead.
Or is he?
Well, he got hit by
he's dead.
like meteor shrapnel.
He done
and
get
so
that.
and he's just when I think Aelin links back up. There's a row of all these dead bodies from people who died out from the meteor strike, and he's down on the end. She almost doesn't recognize him at first because it's just this pathetical thing. And he had these human moments like early on. He's one of the first characters we actually talk to or like learn about after the epilogue. He's a scout, and he's like, he has this thought where like, if it wasn't for my beard, I'd look like I was no more than 12 turnings or whatever. So
I know all about that.
Anyway, so Ult is the next one down.
Sure.
Nice.
He takes a meteor shower to the face. And body, guys, not just his face.
Talk about being callous.
Sure.
It's taking a toll.
Cap. Okay, I get it. Son of a gun, get out of here. All right. So they take the Loonstar. So honestly, it seemed like for a while there they were holding their own against the goblins,
Sure.
but obviously there's extraneous environmental factors. For instance, a moon throwing rocks at you that sort of eliminates them.
I will say at this point, like it's become clear that the incursion has escalated so fast. Like you're like, whoa! Like I was expecting this to be okay. Like a lot of times the arc that these sieges take is like, oh, we held them on the outside gate. Oh, there was something befell us, and now we're falling back, and now we're falling back, and now we're falling back. This is right away, just right to the roof of danger. The central palace has collapsed. Meteors have crushed huge parts of the city. There's swarms of fungus zombies going through. Like, it feels like, whoa, how is this even salvageable at this point? Like, it got real bad real fast.
Yeah, very much an alpha strike.
Sure.
Of goblin stuff. So the remaining members of the Swords of Sigmar, they fight their way to like regroup with their friends. So they do hole up in a ruin, which I think is like the ruin of like a safe house or something.
Somebody say, hey, there's not shroom enough here for
All right,
both
is it okay if I call them fungus eating courts? Because they're royalty and they're fungus.
We can't. We're not in charge of you. You can call them whatever you want.
Totally gonna call them.
If you're all right with being wrong, that's fine. So Ulf is dead, and then also like the captain is like I think also took a hit from the meteor shower,
right,
so she's on her way out. At
she's bleeding to death.
Dying.
Helena.
Yep, dying from the
So
meteors.
Helena, way to go.
No, and so they move to a safe house. That's what it is. And at this point, the rest of the Swords of Sigmar are introduced to a few more like watchmen of the city. I mean, they've got names, but I don't know.
They also have red shirts on.
But
Yeah,
we don't need to remember them.
They're very interchangeable. There's kind of an overly dramatic, conversation of like what they're supposed to do next. Like emotions are high. I suppose that makes sense. But like, it was
I mean, to the extent of talking about where you would expect this to go. There's this like, hey, do we fight? Do we take back the city? Do we just evacuate as many people as we can? Like there's that tension now. Is like, is this a losing battle? Is retreat our only option?
Sure. There's one person who does think that retreat is the only option.
Yeah.
Our boy Boric Jorgensen. Yep. He boogies on out of there. So he being a mercenary and like a bodyguard first and foremost. He's like, all right, well, I want to get paid before I jet.
I mean, he and this is not. I mean, this is a cultural thing as well because he lived by the code, right? Like, there's no profit in a lost venture, right? So
Well, and he's already lost his cannon. He had this like awesome sweet cannon, and it was lost in the palace
sure,
when it was invaded. So like he's like, this is a negative
Yeah.
for me personally. This is a negative for our group. Like
I don't.
red.
Yeah, I didn't feel like that loss of that weapon. I don't remember that factoring in, but like he was there as a bodyguard for a guy who is now dead some time ago. He feels like we brought the warning, it was ignored. This place is a write-off. We're mercenaries. Like it says it right there on the paper.
Sure.
We're mercenaries.
Line 90 of the code. Like
Yeah.
I gotta get out
Yeah,
of here.
it's time for us to pull stakes and go.
Which, I mean, feels like it's treated similarly to the, fanatics of Sigmar. Like, this is, like you said, culturally, like,
Sure.
not in a negative, but just highlighting to the nth degree how much that means to him.
Mm-hmm.
It early on
Yeah.
could also be seen as just like this guy's either a coward or just heartless, etc. But it's like, no, this is part of his.
I think they do well on addressing just how painful this decision is for him and for the people. And there's been some moments up till now where he's shown some connection and affection for them, and that's continued on a little bit even after this decision is made. And I thought that was well written.
Sure. And it's very much a dramatic moment where Aelin like pays him, right? Too. I mean, not in so many words, but like the gist of like, all right, well, here, accept your payment and get out of here. So
What do they do?
It's a heavy moment. So
He leaves.
He does. He leaves, and we never.
he just walks out.
We never see him. We're good.
And just stage left.
So then, from this particular safe house, apparently,
So he's the one who says there isn't shroom enough here for the world. I gotta go.
No, he said there's too much shroom.
Eric, I think I hear someone calling you.
All right, I'll be right back.
So Aelin and Romilla, that's the Way Watcher and the warrior priest, they're actually moved to a different location. They're taken to a secret armory, which is basically like perched atop a guild hall where there are other survivors. So they have to like navigate like secretively throughout the city streets and across the rooftops of the city. But of course, it wouldn't be a book if the Grots don't like find them at the last minute.
Yeah.
And so there's this chase scene across like the rooftops, and
It's pretty fun. Yeah.
Arrows getting shot at them and stuff like that.
I had a problem with that one too.
Of course you did. Tell me about it.
Well, the problem was they were in a shop, and the Moon Clan was on the first floor. And then they ran up to the second floor, and then they like hauled themselves up through an attic to get onto the roof. And they're like, "Oh, it's going to take the Moon Clan a while to get out
Attics
of
weren't
them."
invented in the mortal realms for another 40 years.
And they're like, "Oh, it's going to take the Moon Clan a while to get up to us." And then they got up like 5 seconds later.
No, I mean they got a head start.
But my issue was it had been mentioned not 3 paragraphs earlier that there were spider fang grots on the roofs, and they just completely disappeared. And instead, they're attacked by Moon Clan.
Yeah, I mean, I got the impression that like grots are all over the city, easily distracted. So like, if the spider fang whatever are roaming, like there's some civilians, we're gonna go poach them or whatever. Like it felt like many of the encounters were just like there's looting and you're gonna get jumped by whoever happens to spot you from the looters.
But I totes wanted it to be spider fang.
Well,
Just registering.
we know.
Andy Clark was never gonna win on this one with Paul.
Nope.
Andy, we're still cool though. Me and you, we're all right. And so they're able to like make it to this like secret like safe stash house atop this guild hall. But then we cut to a different chapter.
Well, there was actually a super like fun little exchange
I'll be the judge of
where
whether
they're
or not
like,
it was
"Oh,
fake.
there's a
Hey,
password.
let
Get
them
in."
have
And they're
this
like,
positive.
"We gave them the password," and they showed, and then the guy's like, "No, you need to show me the badge. You're not the right person," because Helena gave her badge to the Way Watcher,
Yeah.
and he's like, "I don't trust you.
How do I know you're not
from around
bandits?
here. Yeah. How do I know
It's
you're
like,
not bandits,
dude? They're not grots. Like
Exactly.
just open up.
Yeah. And then like they open up and there's a female head like watch member and like standing next to the idiot who wouldn't let them in and like
Shaking her
hand as he like punched them in the face. That was a cool moment.
Okay, that is pretty good. Solid beat there. All right, but now let me cut to the next chapter. Hey, Eric, remember when I said that we never saw Bork again? I lied to you. We do see
What?
him
He's a
again.
liar.
He was
Did he come back for us?
No, definitely
No.
not.
No.
He was caught faux show by the Grots and specifically by Skagrat.
Skagrat.
Anyways,
They
I don't know if he was caught by him, but
You saying they got him?
they got him. They got him real
Got him good.
Got him good. They strap him to a chair, and so Skagrat is basically trying to torture like information out of him, like who you here with, who you came with, what's your name, what's your sign,
Who, what, where, when, why.
all that jazz. But to Bork's credit, he doesn't say nothing. Like
Yeah.
I think at one point he makes some fake story up for him, but
And as in torture, he's like, I'm going to give you this thing that's going to turn you into this like living melange of mushroom and man, and then shows him a guard that was with him when he was trying to escape from before.
Yeah.
So like Boric knows exactly what's going on.
It's
And-
it's gross. He's definitely getting turned into a mushroom.
And if we can like kind of just like do a little subtext, go back a little bit. Eleonora, when she got hit by the shrapnel in the workshop, was working on these little bombs, and one of them was set underneath the gun, as it were, you're talking about from earlier, to blow up. But Boric ended up having one of those bombs on his person.
Yeah, they gave him 2. He used 1, and he's like, I got to keep this extra 1 on me. Like, seems super unsafe. But
well,
yeah,
But turns out Skagrat's like, I'm gonna turn you into this like human mushroom thing.
this is the most extended period we get with any goblin or grot conversation. And I thought it was actually pretty well done. Like as far as like when he first starts talking, you got to concentrate on the words to try and figure out what exactly he's saying. I thought that was fun. I enjoyed that moment.
and I like the classic, like, you tell me what I want to know, I'll let you go. And I'm like, and for a split second, I'm like, I kind of believe him. Damn it, he got me. Like, I'm not supposed to believe that.
Yeah.
But he transforms Bork such that he's able to, like, he's so mushroom, he's able to slip his bonds and hit the button on his bomb and he blows himself up. So to his credit, he lasts to the bitter end and he doesn't give up any information that he knew anything.
And there's a point here where like he's clearly having these memories of his crew. Like this is what drives him because everyone's got their breaking point. And he
not me, but keep going.
he managed to persevere through some pretty awful stuff, and it's all on the basis of how much he's abandoned his crew, and he's at some level he's ashamed that they kind of abandoned him in his sense, in his mind, but also that he in turn abandoned them. But he still feels good enough for them, or has enough goodwill towards them that he's unwilling to sell them out, even if he's. At one point, like maybe he crosses his mind, like maybe he's actually right. Maybe I will get out of here if I just tell him something. But yeah, so he has this moment of sacrifice, which is pretty cool. Kills a Brugit, who is part of the, and then there's
one of the Gobapaloozas.
Yeah,
the Brugit.
And there's a troll bodyguard that saves Skagrat.
Yeah, like throws his body, like
So
throws himself on top of
Boric
Skagrat.
ends up as Boomshroom.
Yeah,
Just let people do
So that's 3 down.
that was the end of Bork. Well, are we counting Varling?
4 down.
4 down.
Half
So-
strength.
Yep. So now we're in
So
this.
we have the ladies
Late.
and
So we still
and the
have
Death
Eleanor.
Mage,
And the Death Wizard. Yeah.
We still have the Death Wizard. We still have the Way Watcher, and we still have the Priestess.
Correct.
Romilla.
Yep.
Romilla, yeah.
Exactly. So
So they decide that at this point there is one option left, and Eleonora is
everybody
like,
die in
"Look, there is one more place that we can go. If we go this one place, we can actually set off a bomb
Sure.
that will
This-
erase everything." Because they realize that it's not actually a plot to take over Draconium; it's actually a plot to take over Hammerhall Aksha.
And this is an interesting point where there's this debate about is this just a siege where we just happen to be in the way of the avalanche, and that is a common conception of like if you're targeted by the forces of destruction that's what's going on. But they say, look, like if this was just being in the way of the avalanche, there would not have been a year of lead up to this of disappearances and poisoning our food stores and all that sort of thing. Like this has been planned. There's something going on here. And so that's what comes down. Also, interestingly, and we learned this a little bit in the conversation, was that Brugit apparently had to make some bargain with some awful beings. Like Skagrat mentions it. He's like, you don't understand. Like he had to he bargained these poisons. He had to talk to some bad folks So there may have been some collaboration between Chaos and Gratz.
I didn't pick up on that.
Yep.
Because early on, the swords are, when they're seeing all these fungus things, they're like, "This is Nurgle, right? Like we've seen Chaos before. This got to be Nurgle, right?"
This is your way back into Varlin turning into a mushroom. Collaboration.
Sure.
All I'm saying.
And that speaks to Ramilla's backstory, where she was the lone survivor of a Nurgle infestation or something like that. So anyway, but they figure out, hey, there's more barrels of this thing, of this poison that the Regent Militant ended up being corrupted by.
Ingested, yeah.
There's a ton of those all stacked up right next to this piece of the meteor that's getting carved into a loon shrine. So like something legit is going on here, and it's not. So the debate here is like, do we evacuate? It's theoretically, they think the debate is, do we evacuate or do we stay and try and figure out how to blow this up? And that's where Eleanor has the plan of, I can adapt all these steam/thermal piping, that's channeling the energy of Akshi to heat and power the city. If I overload it, I can create a detonation which might vaporize this poison.
And it's like the pipes or something are conveniently under the city square of all this like poisonous stuff. So like the way I've got it coordinated is like I can blow that place, like, everything up to smithereens, but like that place to
Is
smithereens.
it like the green flame in
green flame
Game of Thrones?
kind
There's
the,
these
sa- the
stores.
same the same result.
remember
No,
that in AOS.
she's blowing up like the heating system of the city as a whole, because we're based off of volcanic
Right.
subterranean like hot springs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So like this is what permeates throughout
But it's
the
a city built on a top of a thing that could explode.
Yep.
So
Well, and the barrels are conveniently next to the canal or river that will head down to Hammerhall, actually, right?
well, I mean, presumably that's the plan,
Yeah.
right? Like they're going to get dumped in that, and
Yep.
it's gonna. So they kind
Water
of
supply.
intuit that this is an attempt to knock out Hammerhall Aksha.
Yeah. And so they have this last-ditch effort of Eleonora and Ramilla need to make it to this place to set off this chain reaction. And every other soldier that they know of is going to go and do this like kind of defending action to distract them, to make sure that they can get in, because it's right next to where
Right.
everybody is gathering.
They're trying to
So-
fine tune this. Like if we send too many people on the
Yep.
the actual mission, then they're going to draw every grot, and if we send too few, then they're going to get overwhelmed.
Yep.
So we'll send a small elite. It's the two of them and some watch persons, and then diversionary.
Yeah, red shirts. And then,
I mean, red shirts, but also Aelin and the wizard.
yeah. But the red shirts are the ones that go with Eleanor and Ramilla.
Sure.
Right. So, but they send the Waywatcher and the Death Wizard with the main fight with the last, like, theoretical officer of the watch that's left over.
Right.
And they're like, this is the plan. This is what we're going to do. And they walk into the square, and the officer's just like, no, we're going to kill them all. They're like, crap.
Yeah. Well,
Everything.
they get there, and it looks like there's fewer grots than they expected.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we could win this. We could just win this straight up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
It's a good thing
So-
grots aren't super sneaky or anything.
they have this horrible battle, that just like complete losing battle that happens in the middle of the square.
Right.
And Eleonora ends up biting it.
No, wrong name again.
Sorry.
Aelin.
Aelin.
Yeah. So they're because of like the trick, I guess, from the goblins. They're lured into like rushing, headstrong into the goblin forces, and they're ambushed from behind, right? So because of that, they're attacked on both sides, which
I don't believe you.
it's just kind of a bummer. But like,
Aelin would not let that happen.
well, no, she doesn't. No.
There's a loon
it's
shrine.
It's the humans. She's against it, so she tries to like curtail the
she
charge.
and Bardaman are like, damn it, like they they couldn't hold them back, and they're like, I guess our best bet, I guess we go with
Move
them.
forward,
Like
yeah.
we're gonna try and make the best of this bad situation.
But the other thing is that there's a loon shrine in the center, so they've already killed a bunch of grots. They showed up again within 12 inches of the loon
Oh my
shrine.
God.
So they're behind
Yeah.
the Waywatcher and the Death Wizard.
But in the grand scheme of things, like this is kind of their point. Like the whole reason they're even here is right to distract the main grot
Yeah.
forces,
Yeah.
which is what they're actually accomplishing. But you're right, Aelin does biff it at this point.
And the story is flip flopping back and forth.
Yeah.
It creates a good tension of like how much progress are Ramilla and Eleonora making versus like what's happening in the square, and this I don't know. I don't know if it was the time of day I was reading it or what, but I thought Aelin's death was pretty like
Super
an
noble.
emotional.
Yeah, that's pretty good, yeah.
I mean, she literally, so Bardaman, like, he's this old guy already, and he expends a huge amount of his energy, like casting some spells or whatever, and like overdoes it. And he's got a cool attitude about things. Like, I probably shouldn't have done that, or I probably shouldn't do this, but here we go. Like,
Doesn't he say at one point, like, I should have died a long time ago? So,
Yeah.
like, honestly, today's a good day for me to drop.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
But Aelin dies protecting his, like, because he's worn out. Like, he's just limp eventually. Like, he can't even cast spells anymore.
Borderline comatose body.
Yep. And it has like the stabbed in the calf, like cuts another more in the back, gets another more. Someone bites her on the arm. She's grossed it, like, stabs him in the head. Like, she's down to one arm, and then she's eventually down. And she falls dead on top of Bardaman's body.
Protects his body.
Yeah.
You can hear the dramatic, like, opera music playing as she draws, and like the slow motion scene where she takes it. Well, it's kind of like Lord of the Rings, Boromir's death,
Yeah.
where he goes down real slow and he takes an arrow and then he cuts an orc, all that jazz. Same sort of effect. Super dramatic.
Then Eleanor and Ramilla are going towards this engine.
Yeah.
And the red shirts get ambushed by more of these fungus-eating court, and they get taken care of. So it's just Ramilla and Eleonora running through.
They have Thackeray. Watchman Thackeray's in
That's
there
right.
with him going. Yeah.
And they finally find exactly where they need to be, but the pressure isn't right.
Yeah.
So then they need to go to this like other place because that's where the real engine is, because that's where Eleonora researched it. So they get there, and then
And the whole time she's getting more and more feverish.
Yep.
Like,
because of the spider bite.
Yeah.
And they get to the engine room, and they realize that the reason why there's no pressure in the system and why they needed to come here is because it's infested with spiders. And so they have to like climb up and left and right and up and down, like to get to
AB, sorry.
exactly the top, like the third level of the boiler, in order to hit the right thing to make it overload, basically.
Yeah.
And then they get thrown out the window. So
Boom.
Yeah. I mean, it looks like, so here's talking about like expectations for this book. Like at this point, like I'm thinking, because there's an archetype of this kind of story, like a sort of Dirty Dozen thing where everybody like has their death on the way to this thing. And so they get in the backstory. Like Ramilla's been a surrogate mother to Eleonora. And Eleonora doesn't, because of her nature, doesn't want to act without certainty, but there's this duality of Eleonora wanting to act with certainty, and Ramilla, like, faith is important. And so she ends up, because Eleanor is so out of it at one point, she's got to make decisions for them. And then they're like, all right, we'll do it together. It's not just on you. And so this is a point, like, I think clearly, because they figure out they're going to blow themselves up, but Eleanor figures out a way, like, if I overload this thing, it's going to drop a pipe. Anyway, so what Paul's saying, Eleanor at the last minute kind of figures out like a 1 in a million escape. They start running across this pipe, which is blowing a hole through the wall, and then the explosion comes and it hurls them out through the wall. Like, yeah, exactly. And that'll come up later. But this explosion comes up, vaporizes the poison. Skagrot.
well, before we get there,
Oh,
this point definitely made me angry.
because there were spiders, but there weren't anybody riding them.
Yep, there were
Oh
no
my God.
grots.
Pooh,
Because they
Ernst.
had giant spiders, they had gigantic spiders, they had arachnoroks,
Yeah.
they had this malign intelligence, but he couldn't bother to put the grots on the back of them.
You
that
already
come
read
with
the battle
models.
tome, Paul. Go read the battle tome
So
again if you want to
annoyed.
read the battle tome.
Don't
So annoyed.
Skitter strands not have grots
Just
on them?
skitter strands, but those are only arachnoroks. There's no giant spiders without riders. There's no gigantic spiders without riders. It's like all the armies you see at tournaments that are like, oh, I don't want to paint the grots. I'm just going to paint the spiders.
I hate this
And he
so
wrote
much.
it into the
Yeah.
Black Library novel.
Sorry,
It just
listeners.
frustrated the heck out of me.
I think
So annoyed.
it would be problematic too if he was trying to cram every unit into the book and making sure that like
Yeah.
every version or variation of that fit.
Yeah.
I mean, part of
He didn't do that.
but I think part of what he's trying to do is give more sinisterness to Gloomspite beyond just their just martial come in and attack.
Yeah, they were
Like
sinister AF.
Like even like from the beginning where like that they can control like insects to come in and just devour bodies. So I think he's I mean, obviously, painting a part of the more insidious part of Gloomspite, not the comical.
But the Spider Fang aren't comical. They're deadly. I did not appreciate it.
So Romilla and Eleonora are thrown to safety for the most part, and I mean they survived this deadly conflagration, and so they find themselves searching the city. So this is the epilogue actually. So let's consider the book done.
All right, book's done.
Yep. So there's searching the city for their friends. They find Aylin's body. Real sad, kind of bummer. But they also find Batraman, who
The
is
Death Wizard.
The Death Wizard,
And he brings them all back to life.
who's almost dead, but not quite dead. So they're able to like resuscitate him. Right. So he's been knocked out, and so they stabilize him and get him back to zero.
Yeah.
In D&D terms, no death saves. And so they leave the city. Like there's nowhere else to go. There's just dead bodies every which way.
As they leave the gates, they're like, oh, like hopefully there were a bunch of evacuees and they just see dead bodies all the way out, and they're like, I guess nobody
dead bodies all the way down. And so they navigate out of town. They start walking the path back to civilization. But fortunately, surprised, they do actually find a bunch of survivors. Like they're walking down the road, and they hear some movement out in the woods, and it turns out like it's survivors who had like made camp like out in the forest. And that, for the most part, is the end of the book. Like they reconvene with what's left of the citizens. And that gives you a little bit of hope for
it gives you a positive
the future.
ending.
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily for Draconium per se, but for the people at least. So happy ending for all. We made
Except
it.
for Paul.
Except for Paul.
37.5% of the Swords of Sigmar made it through.
Yeah, exactly. Is that what it is? Yeah. Okay. And that is your book. Any other plot stuff people want to talk about before we move on to some standardized questions?
Is this like standardized testing?
Sure, it's exactly like that.
Dang.
Man, I'm really
Really good at that.
I was gonna just do CCC down the line. Do they still do those with pencils, or can you do them on computers now? I don't even know.
I don't think they do them on computers. I think they still do Scanstron.
You think you were doing it on computers? Anyway, so
You would think so,
what
but they make
shape are
money
the
on it.
characters at the end, or the setting even? So, guys, the Swords of Sigmar have some vacancies, I would say.
Yeah.
So if you're looking to join a mercenary group, they got room for you. So what, 3 out of the 8?
Yeah.
Would you say are left?
Yep.
Cool.
Eleanor has a big lightning-shaped scar on her leg.
Yep.
She's become healthy again. She has this moment of talking to, again, Romilla, her surrogate mother, and she can't explain, like, well, I'm feeling better. Like, this is Eleonora's moment of, like, oh, maybe the divine exists or something like that.
For someone who's pretty analytical and really grounded, that's a character moment for sure. The city of Draconium still have some citizens, like we said, but it takes some doing to get that town livable again. Like I don't know if that'll ever be like repopulated. Maybe
There's some taint there.
Sure. And the Bad Moon still wandering around like it always is. Bad Moon unfazed. Like so, I guess we didn't really talk about. It's at some point.
Unfazed moon.
Damn it, that is good. But like at one point in the story, was it after the explosion? The Bad Moon just up and leaves. Like,
Yep,
I'm
sure.
bored. I'm bored with this. See ya.
Well, and yeah, we did have Scragrot having plot armor, where he's standing in the middle of the square
Teleported
when
away.
everything's going away, and then all of a sudden, puff of smoke and gone.
Yeah. That's
It seems like the Bad Moon was attracted to things and plots that were going on, and as soon as that was foiled,
Yep.
whatever energy was there was
that's a good
released
way.
him.
I'd look at it like that. Sure.
It, her.
Any other interesting states of being now that the book is?
I want to
again?
read the prequel to the last party that Eleanor was a part of, and they all died.
I mean, it talks some about that. She had a
Yep.
workshop that burned down, killed her dad,
Yep.
something like that. So
I mean, trying to create a conspiracy where she has been and will continue to be the sole survivor, or one of the sole survivors
Well-
of multiple parties.
I mean,
Does that-
Romilla
so you're saying
and
that-
Eleanor are already like survivors of previous disasters.
Yeah, Eleonora was actually kicked out of the previous guild because they said that she set the fire that killed her father.
Wait a second.
We're on to you,
Yeah,
Andy
we
Clark.
got you. We got you. All right. Here's one of my favorite questions. Who is your dude? And gender neutral dude. I'll ask Eric. Who was your dude
Ooh,
from what you
can I-
read and what we told you?
From what I read, I would say I was probably starting to get into Eleanor the most. There was just some very clear purpose in what made her happy and what she was focused on, but she also showed signs of like a self-awareness of like, this is what I need, so I know I'm going to do this to help me get that, but this is really what I need. So I did, even at the beginning, felt like I really enjoyed the character, how everyone else treated her, how Andy Clark addressed her, and like she was just always like, even at the very beginning where they're talking about what they're going to do, like her tinkering, her doing things was just very much a part of the noise of the group. So
Cool. Right on. I'm going around the horn, Davey.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be Old Chev, but just didn't get quite enough of that character. Interesting. Wanted to know a lot more.
I'm sorry he died, Davey.
Yeah.
I know, but I mean, whatever. But it ended up being Aelin, and if an author can write an elf character that I'm like, I like that character. They've done it because usually I'm really anti-elf. We've gone on diatribes about this, but he did a good job of, you get in from Aelin's perspective, and she'd be talking about like, yeah, I just like I misread human emotions. I know that I do this, and kind of played up the alien, like the difference more than like the I'm so much better. It was more of a like, we're very different, and I appreciated that. And there were some interesting things, like she was able to blur her outline, and had some different talents. But that, and then she had one of the more emotionally impactful scenes at the end, like fighting for a lost cause from her perspective, defending to her last breath. Like, this is a thing where when you're in, like you end up in this combat situation based on this big decision, like we're gonna save Hammerhall Aksha, but when it gets down to the nitty gritty, you're there for the person beside you, and that's what she was doing. And I thought that was pretty excellent. So
there's an interesting realm of life, realm of death thing going on too between the two.
Sure, yeah, good point.
It's.
Yeah.
Well, and you don't necessarily peg elves, or even wood elves specifically, or wanderers, as like sacrificial, like for the common good sort of thing. They seem, you think very aloof. So the fact that she was willing to die for like a human, I don't know if those same sort of like discrepancies like exist in the Age of Sigmar, but I feel like a lot of that gets carried over.
That was an example of like it felt like the members of the Swords of Sigmar really liked each other.
Yeah,
like
they did.
Yeah, and that came across really well from multiple different angles, and there was a interconnected network of like, the different relationships within that, and with 8 people, that's a lot of connections to make.
Right before she biffed it, she was talking to Bartraman. He says, shouldn't have, but my dear, needs must, he croaked. Probably best if you, she says, do not tell me to leave you behind. Bartraman hissed Aelin, hoisting him into his feet and supporting him as best she could. Don't you dare, he gasped. I was going to say, you best hurry up.
That was a pretty good line.
It's a good moment.
And towards the end, and these I saved some good Aelin quotes. Aelin was not given to panic. She had long held a reputation amongst the Swords of Sigmar for her glacial calm in even the direst of situations. Now, though, she felt panic threaten. So, like, even this weird, like, goblin invasion, like, just, got to that elven calm that she was known for. Paul, who's your dude? Or dudette?
It was Ramilla. Sorry. It was Ramilla. I just really enjoyed her character. She had kind of a cool backstory. And just introduction was super cool. And she survived, so that's always
I'm just going to say, you get a point for surviving.
Yep.
My dude was maybe a tie between Aelin, but then also Altchev, so I did get enough out of her, or at least it hinted at enough that it drew me to him. I think it was to his credit. Oftentimes I tend toward characters that do have models, but this was a rare example of a guy who didn't have a model equivalent that I was still really interested in. I think just his little, what little we learned about him still informed the realm of fire a little bit, like just what tribal fire worshippers of Akshi look like. His tattoos, his fun little mannerisms and like quirks. The fact that when you're doing something fast, you do it flicker quick, which really was really endearing to me. So I felt like there was a loss to have him die relatively early in the book. because there was so much more I wanted to learn from him. So there's all sorts of stuff that he knew that I didn't know that now I'm not going to get to know, and that's sort of like that's a loss. Like I miss out on that, and so that bummed me out.
In the sequel, Eleanor and Ramilla are going to go visit his clan.
Ooh.
And they'll learn more.
Sure. TM. Yeah, we get that. But I really liked him, and I liked even in the group of Swords of Sigmar, when we talk about there's different connections, he still had an air of like an outsider to him, not because of like interpersonal stuff, but just because of like the weird like primal aspect to him, and the fact that he's a scout and he's sort of outside like civilization. So there was a connection, but also a separate aspect to him that I dug real good.
Which has to be pretty strong in that group of people
Outsiders.
who don't belong.
Yeah.
You know.
Exactly. That's true. That's a good point.
Outsider amongst outsiders.
All right. Next.
Double outsider.
Question: what do we learn about the Mortal Realms that we didn't know before? I don't know that I learned personally all that much. Like, I guess what another city looks like in Akshi, like with the acid rain, was kind of a new thing. The fact that Hammerhall Aksha is always being targeted by stuff. Like, come on, man. Give us a break. Did you guys learn anything about the Mortal Realms?
I mean, we mentioned that it looked like there was some kind of bargain between the Greenskins, and so that was new to me. The fact that there might have these devious plans, and I wasn't in on y'all's Gloomspite episode, the Battle Tome, so I was picking up more since I wasn't on part of that.
Gotcha. All right, let's do. We did get a listener question. Tristan wanted to know in Discord, and if you want to ask us questions on Discord, you can go to themortalrealms.com/Discord.
Plug.
Yeah, exactly. He wanted to know did the characters in Gloomspite inspire you in your own narratives? Paul, you do a lot of goblin stuff. Were you inspired at all?
No.
Ouch. Yeesh. Cool. I wasn't necessarily inspired per se, in that like this was another example of a party of like interesting, different characters in an adventuring party, which you don't get to do a lot of in Age of Sigmar, because it's a lot of like mono. I don't say chromatic, but a mono-racial like war band. So it's rare that you get to put a bunch of different types of races and characters into an army. However, I wonder if
Cities of Sigmar coming in hot.
Exactly, a new battle tome. If that's going to change things in some capacity. And in fact, I hope it does. Like, that would be interesting to see on the table. I do have a lot of Wood Elf stuff. Are you guys feeling inspired after reading this book?
Yeah. For me, it was there were a number of moments I was like, oh man, like AOS RPG, pretty rad. Even that they had these adventures and missions in like individual heroic arcs within this apocalyptic thing, like, because that's a big thing. Like, you look at AOS on the tabletop and it's these big battles, and like how does one person have an interest, or how do you have a party in that? And this was a neat way of inserting that into a bigger conflict and still having like a very impactful, interesting and consequential role.
Yeah, well, and it's fun, like with the characters in the book, like each one of them had little backstories, kind of reminiscent of like a character's backstory in an RPG.
Sure.
Which is kind of fun.
If I was watching someone doing an RPG and they'd come up with characters that deep, I've been,
did a good job.
Yeah, I think similarly, it definitely stoked those flames for when Cubicle 7 gets AOS RPG out.
If they get it out.
I'm still going to have faith, because that's what the Regent militant says I should have. But I will, I mean, I think, to me, in terms of fleshing out, like, how does a city operate, and how does it operate with the different races, and coming from Azerheim or Azir, and kind of how they operate. So I think that aspect of it does get me excited for Cities of Sigmar. Like, there are just so many different ways your city could operate, and I hope that there's some rules for that.
Sure. He also wanted to know if it materialized in any models, but I don't know that any of us have built these models yet. I think it's still fresh in our minds, but maybe it'll result in models down the line.
The Hendrik was another example of, like, I don't know if he was a deserter of, like, the
fellow from Mirrored City,
like free people kind of thing. What was that?
Like the dude from Mirrored City?
Yeah. Like him. Just another. I mean, that's where humans come from.
Former free guilder.
An adventurer in the Mortal Realms is likely to be from the military, something like that.
Do you folks have any questions or things you want to talk about before we get to our review? A lot of head shakes. All right, so let's hop into this review here. I'm going to lead with Paul so that we can refute it.
If
More confrontational than we need.
if the bad guys were not Gloomspite, I could probably say it was about a 5 or a 6 out of 8. But having it be my favorite faction and being just so disappointed with the representation, I would probably give it a 2.
Oh, a 2.
Woof.
2 legs.
I had a really hard time with this book.
Like a
At least it
grot.
has 2 legs to stand on.
Sure. 2 legs good. That's what I've always heard, so. 4 legs bad.
Yeah.
That's the reference.
Yep.
Sure. All right, David, give me a review.
So this has a caveat in that obviously it's a style. If survival horror is not your thing, then you're gonna have a hard time with it. If you are looking for something, I would say early on, probably in the first 1/3, I thought it was pretty. I already knew Paul had finished it, and I knew he'd had a lot of issues with it, and
So that meant you were going to love it.
well, I was kind of looking for something that made me think this is out of the ordinary from Black Library. And for the first third, I was like, this is rote Black Library. Like, this feels like pretty dead on. I would not. This feels right down the middle for what Black Library is. And it wasn't until the latter 2/3 that I was like, okay, like I think Paul got something that he wasn't expecting. So if you think that genre is going to be tough for you, then probably not your favorite book. But if you're looking for something for like characters that you can attach to, characters that you can identify with, characters that are interesting, I think this is up in the very top of anything. I love Josh Reynolds for the way he writes villains. Andy Clark, best protagonist I've read in Black Library.
Oh, wow.
Period. So
Nice.
Sure. Eric, from what you read, give me a little
Yeah, I mean,
pre-review.
there's been a few books we've covered that I haven't been able to get through, and I've not necessarily gone back to them. Like, the recap is enough. But the little bit I've read has me intrigued enough by this, like, tells me enough of a story about this group, and that I want to go back and read those words. I want to finish the book, read those words, read those moments that, are the end of those characters, right? And so I don't know that I've, after having everything spoiled, still wanted to go back and read, and I definitely want to finish reading this. And it's not a long read. Like, it's not a novel. I don't know what. It's more of a novella, I think, right? Or is it a full novel?
I think it's a regular length.
I mean, it's
As far as Black Library
I don't
goes.
remember.
Standard
In print, it was how many pages?
320, something like that.
So that's a pretty good amount. If you can. But I mean, I don't think and it's really easy to get into, like, from my point of view. So I'm excited to keep reading it and finish it up even after getting it all spoiled. Thanks, guys.
You're welcome.
Aaron, lay it on us.
Oh, I will. Get ready for it. Oh, God. Prepare your minds.
So prepared.
I liked it. No, it was good, and I do recommend it. Again, it's kind of what I was saying before, from like the uniqueness perspective. If some of the Age of Sigmar novels have sort of gotten dull or repetitive for you, I think this is a nice change of pace. I guess one of the similarities is that we do sometimes deal with groups of order heroes, and this is another example of that. But I particularly like the ones that we were dealing with. It's great when you can have a bunch of different unique characters working together, and this is a great example of that. So if you liked Spear Shadows, if you liked maybe lesser degree Callous Atoll, because it's not that big a group, but like if you like that order grouping, then I think you'll have something to enjoy here as well. If you like being thoroughly creeped out, you're going to get it, because man, if I can't look at a mushroom the same way again after reading this book, and I already didn't like them, so you can only imagine.
For all the violence and awfulness that exists in Warhammer, Age of Sigmar, all that sort of thing, this is one of the books I was more disturbed by.
Yeah, it was a different brand of grossness in a sense. And I haven't read, honestly, any, I don't think, of the Warhammer horror stuff, but I get the impression that this would maybe fit right in with just a few more tweaks.
Sure.
Or if it was maybe more focused on the horror than it was. I did feel like an easy throughout it, and even the first half, which even if it started slow, I still felt like thoroughly creeped out or like on the edge of my seat for all the stuff that like you couldn't see, all the stuff that was off scene or off camera. I think because of that, it very had like a cinematic like aspect to it. It seemed like it was a movie in some parts. So I do recommend it, and I'd be interested to maybe read more. I think that's it. Should we just end the episode right there with that glowing review?
Clunk. Yeah.
Done and done.
It's time for our reforging, but Sigmar willing, we'll be back soon. Like, subscribe, and share, or leave a review. Join us on Discord, drop a tip on our Patreon. Anything you can do will to spread the word of Sigmar farther than we can do on our own. Chat with us anytime about your thoughts on Twitter, @TheMortalRealms.
You can get me at red_Zeke.
You can find me at Dos Asos.
You can find me at PJ Shard.
And I'm at StoneMonk Gamer. You can find all of our Mortal Realms shows and content at www.themortalrealms.com.
So I'm going to say something. Feel free to cut it out later if you don't want to.
I always do. So I guess I want to say follow my lead, but
If it were my turn, I'd say, hey, ready to give us your money, money, money?
Not going to do it. I know what you want, but it's not going to happen.
There it is.
That one's a hard one.
Yeah,
That one's a
real
particularly hard one.
real tricky.
This is where you edit. This is where you edit.